All right, everybody, I do believe we are live. Welcome to the Break the Rules stream. Pra, pra, pra. We are all the way live. I am Lev Polyakov at LevPo on Twitter, your humble host, and with me is the great and powerful Giovanni Pennacchietti, surrounded by beautiful ladies in his new Twitter avatar. Follow him on @GiantGeo.
We'll
And
throw it
follow
up
me.
later, Lev.
Yes, we shall. And follow me at LevPo. Forgot to mention that. We have Average Centrist, a newcomer to the stream. Welcome, Average Centrist. Thank you so much for coming in. And we have got Arthur Bloom. Thank you so much, Arthur, for coming in. You are a wonderful journalist, great writer, and great pleasure to have you here. We are going to be joined by Cathy Young coming in pretty soon. I believe she's coming in right now. So, guys, I am going to welcome Cathy Young to the stream as well. Don't forget to subscribe. Patreon.com/breaktherules. You know how it goes. We need your support to keep growing. And when we grow, you grow as a result. I believe in manifest destiny. But anyway, let us also say hi to Cathy Young. Cathy, thank you so much for coming in here. I don't know if you're going to have the webcam on or not, but let me know if you can hear us and if we can hear you.
Yeah, I don't know why it isn't on. Hang on just a sec.
No problem at all. And let me also, I'm going to share this avatar right now with everybody. I know, Gio, you said that you were going to share it, but it is just too good of an avatar not to share as the people are still going on to this stream right now.
You share, Lev. That's yeah.
Here we go. Look at this beautiful avatar of Giovanni Pennacchietti and his harem.
It's like Eurasian despotism right there. That's...
Absolutely. So, great, Cathy
And here
Young.
we go. I'm on the video now.
Yes, you are. Thank you so much for coming in, Cathy. Очень приятно вас видеть опять.
Спасибо.
So today, actually, for those who don't know, is a special holiday. It's a Yom Kippur. It is the Day of Atonement. And even though I should have been, celebrating
today,
it,
Lev?
it's today. Yeah,
Oh.
today is Yom Kippur. So even though I should have been in a way celebrating it at the least to do, honor to my ancestors and all that, I think that we can celebrate it in a way here today. And celebrate isn't the right word because it's all about atonement. But
Right.
I think in general, what this stream tries to do, and what I encourage people to do in general, is try to atone for having this idea that the people who you are speaking with are straw men, just are, the absolute, worst idea of how you would portray the other side. So regardless of any opinions that any of us happen to have today on the stream, what I would encourage is to steel man as much as possible the arguments of the other side when it comes to the media, when it comes to culture, when it comes to our civilization. And I think that when we do that, if we have common sense, and I think that all of us here on the stream, as well as some people who are watching, do have enough common sense to be able to work through all of that difficulty. So with that, I know Gia, you have something important to say, but before that, I just wanted to ask Arthur, Cathy, and Average Centrist specifically Arthur and Cathy, as far as why did you become a journalist in the first place? Were you forced to be one against your will? And if not, what was it that prompted you to become a journalist? And then I would love to also get a bit of an intro from Average Centrist as well, for all the people who do not know who you are. So let us start with Cathy. You go first.
Sure. Well, first of all, I guess, was I forced to be a journalist? I don't know. I mean, how did it get forced to be a journalist? That's kind of I actually started out at the age of probably 8 or 9, wanting to be a writer. And actually, you know what? I just remembered that my first foray into journalism was probably at the age of 6. My mom still has somewhere, I wrote these little pieces that were supposed to be radio commentary. I was playing at being a radio. I guess it was sort of almost a podcast monologue. And so I was doing at the age of like 6 or 7. And I had this whole persona where I was supposed to be an adult, and it was supposed to be a radio program about child rearing. And I think I was sort of like trying to impersonate like what would my mom say if she had a radio show. So I was a weird child, and like I was talking about like my daughter, who was actually like me. So this was a very kind of surreal like little exercise in a podcast, I suppose. And remember, this was in the Soviet Union and like the late 1960s, where like the idea of somebody just having their own show and like talking about whatever they wanted to talk about was just totally bizarre. But yeah, so this was my first try at being a journalist.
What was this back in Russia?
Yeah, this was I was 6 years old. I lived in Russia until I was 16. So.
And what part of Russia?
Definitely in Russia. And I mean, I was also writing little stories. So, mostly I tried to write fiction. But yeah, I just remembered that this was my first attempt at journalism.
Was this where in Russia were you born, by the way?
Moscow. I mean, I wrote a book later called Growing Up in Moscow. So that, that tells you that I did in fact grow up in Moscow. So
that would be something if somebody grew up in St. Petersburg and then wrote Growing Up in Moscow just to, just screw around.
Mess with people, right?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. But
anyway, then I spent my teenage years basically like wanting to be a novelist and a poet. So I was like writing stuff. I remember that I wrote like at the age of, I think 14, I tried to write a mystery novel that was set in the United States. This was after reading some American detective stories. Like I obviously had never been to America, and I tried to write this like American detective novel, which was not very good. I was also 14 years old, and I tried to write about sex. So it was, I really didn't know a whole lot about it at the time. So
13 years old.
So yeah, I started like real journalism when I came here, and like initially I did some writing in Russian actually for a weekly paper that was published out of Queens called the New Gazette in Russian. And
I didn't know there were Russians living in Queens. I assumed it was just a Brooklyn thing.
No, there were lots of Russians. There were like little Russian enclaves my family originally, when we came here, settled in Jackson Heights and then ended up moving to New Jersey. But this was a paper that was published by a guy who lived in Forest Hills. And he worked for Radio Liberty, but he also on the side like had this weekly newspaper in Russian, and I wrote for them. I was like 17 years old, and I did all sorts of like little feature stories and book reviews, and they were kind of very impressed with me because they thought I was this like young prodigy. And anyway, I definitely wanted to like break into American journalism. I was a really, really huge fan of George Will, and I can't believe that like he's actually still around and has a new book out, because George Will was like my first role model. And like, I really want to be like George Will, who writes a column 3 times a week and can.
So he is a libertarian conservative political commentator. Writes for Washington Post, Wall Street Journal. Very interesting.
Right,
so from there, yes.
Well, to make a long story short, I really don't want to, keep this all centered on me, but I started actually writing a column, which is, what I wanted to do. Like, that was my dream. When I went to Rutgers, I was an undergrad at Rutgers in New Brunswick, New Jersey. And I opened the student newspaper and saw that they were looking for columnists. This was like day 3 of my freshman year at Rutgers. And I was like, I want to do this. And they were very excited because they didn't have, like, they were like, the whole diversity and inclusion thing was already starting. This was like 1984, because before that I had taken classes at a community college because I was kind of easing my way into American education. So so they were really looking for female columnists, because I think they had, like, at the time they had a nearly all male columnist lineup. And they thought my point of view was interesting, because I was sort of socially liberal, but I was also really conservative on stuff like, the Cold War. I was very much, like, pro-Reagan in terms of like standing up to the Soviet Union. And anyway, so that's when I started writing. And that was really kind of the beginning of my journalism career. I came to the attention of a great English professor who was putting together a sort of anthology of short journalism pieces as a reader for college students, and wanted to include some student authors. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, I got a call from him saying, or a letter. I think this was like before people had email. Yeah, I think he just put a letter in my mailbox, and it was like, I'd like to republish 2 of your articles in my book. Oh wow, that's incredible. And he was sort of my mentor. He connected me to some people who eventually, like, got me into on the track of getting my book published, the one about growing up in Moscow. And then it was just kind of, it just went on from there. So, and I mean, I really don't want to, again, I don't want to talk about myself that much, but I had a really interesting career in the political sense, in that I was really kind of all over the place politically, because initially my entry into journalism sort of, had a lot to do with the conservative press. Like, I think because of the stuff I wrote about Russia, and I think like I wrote at one point for the American Spectator, which at the time wasn't nearly as, like, I mean, today it's like this really crazy, like, really far right.
I wouldn't know about that.
But
well, we're gonna get into it.
Not by
we're gonna
my
get into
standards,
it.
far right, Cathy.
I've got a piece coming out in this next issue.
Oh, really? Seriously? Okay.
See, this is what we, Cathy, this is what we do in BTR. We bring everybody together, and we got to steel man each other's arguments here. But
alrighty, so
yes,
but and then, I also ended up writing for a lot of much more mainstream press, and then I landed at Reason, which is of course libertarian,
and the Newsday, Arc Digital, Bulwark Online. You also wrote for the New York Times.
I've written forever. I mean, I had a column at the Boston Globe for 7 years.
Yeah.
I mean, before, like, my first, like, really professional mainstream media sort of outfit was the Detroit News. And at one point, they actually offered me a job, like, they wanted me to, like, join the editorial staff. And they brought me out there, and I just decided that I really didn't want to live in Detroit. So, that was, it was really not the most enticing place to live.
Well, I hope Detroit's going to have its comeback. But now I'd like to go to Arthur Bloom. Arthur, tell us about yourself, why you got into journalism.
Sure, yeah, my journey into far-right journalism. So I basically I wasn't good at anything else, or I found out that I was good at this. I graduated from college, and I was playing in a bunch of bands at the time, and we recorded an album in the home base of DC hardcore, and then I eventually realized I needed to get a job, and so I interned at the Daily Caller, and it was a great place to intern because you could get a lot of clips. I got something like 40 bylines in a couple of months, and it was just a great place. And then I had an embarrassment of riches of jobs that I could have taken. I almost went to work for ISI running their college journalism. So I did some writing in college. I won a National Reporting Award. Mostly what I had done back then was arts journalism. I wrote book reviews and whatnot. And so I kind of enjoyed that, and so I realized I was good at it. So I got this internship at the Caller, and then I had offers from Fox to be Chris Wallace's research assistant, and then to work for ISI, and then the third one was this offer from the American Conservative, and I kind of wanted to write for myself. I wanted my own bylines and things like that, so I picked TAC. I did that for a year and a half. Then I went back to the Caller as opinion editor. I did that for about 3.5 years. And to be honest, so like I thought I made a big mistake when I was at the Caller for 3.5 years, and then I left for grad school. I really wanted to do research in a particular collection out in Kansas on informants and extremist groups, on snitches, becoming a snitch expert. And I thought I had made a big mistake though, because I started that program in the fall of 2016. And I had just been editing the Caller's opinion section, and I found that a lot of these people, I mean, I thought Hillary Clinton was going to win. And so I had gone out there, and then Trump, against the expectations of many people, won. And I thought I'd made this huge mistake, because all these people that I had been editing for a long time were suddenly staffing the administration. I could have gotten a job or something. In retrospect, I don't think it was a mistake. I was really glad I got to do that research, because it ended up being germane to a lot of stuff. But then I came back to DC. I got back into it, hosted a podcast for a while. I quit TAC about 2 months ago, or a month and a half ago, something like that. And I'm working on a couple of freelance projects, one of which is a sort of documentary podcast. So I'm just having a lot of fun. I want to be able to show that I can tell these sort of long form stories. And that's the goal with this new podcast I'm working on. So that's it in a nutshell.
Excellent. And finally, Average Centrist, you are new here. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi. Okay, I don't even know where to fucking start with this shit. I'm a working class geese from the UK. I have a lot of opinions about a lot of stuff. I'm not as well read as some of you guys. I've been watching you guys for a while, by the way. Love your podcast. Like, I've been loving this stuff. I'm an assistant to an architect, so I work a lot from home. So nice. I've been listening to your stuff like the whole time, and it's been a lot of fun. I don't know how much my opinions are going to be valid to this discussion, but I do have some opinions about media. I do have opinions about journalism. I don't know if I want to jump into it right now. I'll probably jump in later, but yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm just a hobby YouTuber. I'm a hobby YouTuber. That's pretty much it for me. And
your family was were your family Mormons, or is that incorrect?
Yes, they were. Yeah. I grew up Mormon.
In the UK?
Yeah.
How does
UK
that work?
Mormons, boy, yeah. UK Mormons. I've had a very strange life. I'm not gonna lie to you. Very strange life. But it's not really about me. I want to talk about media, journalism, all that kind of stuff.
Well, we are definitely going to get into all of that stuff. But first, Gio, we got to address the elephant in the room, as you said. So let's just get this out of the way.
Okay, so, because people in the chat were talking about it, and I have a lot of friends in this sphere. You were accused last year, J. Arthur Bloom, of participating in the spreading of information and doxing of Bronze Age pervert. Your name came up along with the Thinker of Ironies, if you know who I'm talking about.
The who?
The Thinker of Ironies. You know? Campbot. I'm talking about Campbot.
Oh, okay.
To say, so your name came up, and it was alleged that you were spreading information or helped, or it was part of a network. And then people were pointing out how your responses to it were less than total denunciation. I mean, give your perspective. It's just, we're on a journalism stream, so it's our journalistic integrity to address these allegations and to give your side of the story. Because a lot of people, just to be blunt about it, a lot of people don't like you after that happened. So I just wanted to clear the air, more or less, respectfully.
Yeah, sure. So it's not true, and I can't even really figure out where these guys are coming from. I'll just lay out the whole story. I got accused of doxing the Bronze Age pervert, and I was accused of being part of this doxing ring here in DC that was responsible not just for that, but
The
for
Katie
outing
McHugh thing.
yeah, for a number of other doxings that resulted from the emails of Katie McHugh. And my sense is BAP was just sort of playing telephone with some of those guys. And so he got sort of bad information or something like that. Anyway, yeah, so I was briefly involved in superintending a story that Katie McHugh was going to tell about her life and her kind of journey in and out of these extremist, well, I don't know, they're nut jobs, and they really were trying to insinuate themselves in a rather dishonest way into conservative institutions. And I don't really necessarily care about that. The story, and I can prove this with drafts, the story that she wrote that I was superintending for the Spectator, I helped bring it to the Spectator. That's the extent of my involvement. The story that she wrote, and I can prove this with the draft, only names a single person. And so everything that subsequently came from her materials got blamed on me. And so I suddenly became sort of the evil Svengali that was hunting neo-Nazis or like white nationalists in the DC conservative movement. And, it just isn't true. These guys kind of, I do think there's a little bit, look, the Katie McHugh situation is very sad. And it's not really my story to tell, but I can talk about it to the extent that I was involved. She basically, what happened is she left the Daily Caller because it wasn't racist enough for her. And then she got fired from Breitbart because she was too racist for Breitbart. So it's kind of, it's quite a trajectory. And thereafter, she falls further down the crazy hole. And my experience, at least, so I've read a lot of narratives about informants in groups like this. I find them very interesting. And when you read about the ones from women, very often you see that their reasons for getting involved with these groups are basically personal rather than political. And then their reasons for leaving them are basically personal rather than political. And that was definitely the case for Katie. Her reason for, leaving all that stuff behind, she was, let's just say, very badly wronged by one of the buddies of this whole group.
I've heard it from that there was some kind of, but just to push back.
I mean, there's always exceptions to anything that ends up happening with anybody, so I wouldn't necessarily generalize that. But
from the perspective, like I was just going to say quickly, Arth, like just from the perspective of people on the right, they would say that these institutions are sort of holding a boot to the throat of genuinely right-wing people, and that they need to be overcome or at least pushed in a certain directions in order to be efficacious towards true conservative or right-wing causes. So I understand like the huge pushback at that, obviously, because traditionally we would associate the Daily Caller specifically as this sort of mainstream, like on the level of like Fox News minus Tucker Carlson, if you know what I mean, like the mainstream, like normie conservative institution. And so the argument would be that perhaps these people were trying to nudge in a certain direction. I don't know about the racism thing. From my personal stance is that I detest doxing, and I think what Katie did was terrible, irregardless. I understand like a lot of people would view that as, but from your perspective, so then get into like the whole thing with BAP, I guess. Like you were,
but I also want to make sure we don't spend the whole stream on this as well.
Of course,
but just...
I want to move on, just because.
No, this is the first
my
time
own integrity for the
with all of
shows.
this stuff, so I'm glad to talk about it. So yeah, I mean, the question of whether conservative institutions are holding back genuine rightists, it's a question I sort of take seriously. On the other hand, what are they keeping them from doing? They're keeping you from shitposting under a pseudonym for Richard Spencer's blog. I would say that's not really. Is that progress? No. I mean, in no universe is it. On the other hand, it pisses me off that CPAC won't talk about immigration. This is a real thing. No, but to get back to BAP, so I wrote while I was out in Kansas. I wrote for a gossip blog over at The Spectator, And Kantbot had been interviewed by the FBI.
Yeah.
And so the feds were sniffing around a bunch. So I was sort of involved in the neo-reactionary blogging scene. I had a group blog where we published some of those guys. And, finding out that the FBI was interviewing some of them, a little bit of a kind of wake-up call, shocking moment. What's the interest there? So the FBI had questioned Kantbot, and I wrote that story. And I had heard that BAP, people were sniffing around BAP from the feds. And I asked him about that because I was doing stories that were exactly like this. And at one point, I suggested that he FOIA himself, because if that would be a way for him to find out what they had on him or what they were doing, what they were looking into. And I mean, that's how I would handle that situation. But he flipped out and said that this was an attempt to confirm a dox. I never put out any information about him. I never put out his name, I don't think. And that stuff was anyway already out there on 4chan. I mean, he had already been doxxed at that point. I do find it rather interesting that he has all these neocon ties. I wonder if there's a bit of a Pied Piper thing there going on. But, I certainly didn't dox him.
Well, that's... Full disclosure, me and the Thinker of Ironies had a falling out last year, so my opinion is totally biased. But I would say that I've heard the whole the BAP neocon thing. I'm not convinced of it, but I don't know, truly. I just think that Kantbot himself was spinning a yarn, put it that way.
Well, he's become pretty... I agree with you that he's become rather infuriating recently.
Oh,
but
I had to lock my account because of him recently, because he a joke tweet.
All right.
Anyways,
Well, now I think we should move on.
move-
I would like
yeah.
yes, I would like to move on to I think the most important question here, which I think is on everybody's minds. What do you see today as being the level of trust between the public, let's say for now, let's just focus on the American public, and the state of journalism? One thing that I would get rid of from this conversation, even though it does play, I think, a pretty big role, is wokeness. There's that word again. But I think everybody here on the screen, including Cathy, Arthur, everybody can agree that this is a big problem, all of these CRT classes and all of that. And this is something that, because we all agree on it, there's no reason to speak about it. Instead, I want to take that layer of the onion off, and instead, I want to focus on the other layer, which is trust in institutions. One of the things, again, going back to Soviet Russia, that we did not have going for us, as you know, Cathy, is that we had absolutely the worst of the worst institutions. Everybody stole whatever they could whenever it was possible. It was very corrupt. And, everybody's already, hey, Cathy, you may not know this, but everybody's very tired of me saying on BTR that you should never compare America to Russia, that Russia's very corrupt, it's still corrupt, it was corrupt before, yada, yada, yada. But at the same time, because I do that, I have to also give a lot of credence to the problems that I see, which may not necessarily come up in more mainstream circles, when it comes to the idea of expertise, when it comes to the idea of there being an expert class and there being a class within journalism that professional managerial class that may take certain things, that may take certain things either the wrong way or skew things in a particular perspective that may not do justice or may not steelman the arguments of the opposing side. And I think maybe, Arthur, you would be a good person to start this conversation from when it comes to the people who you have spoken with. What exactly are they seeing within the realm of journalism that, let's say, is much more establishment, much more professional, for lack of a better word, much more acceptable, for lack of a better word, that beyond any of the woke stuff is something that they see, that they have a big problem with. So go for it, Arthur. And then we're going to go to Cathy.
There's a lot in there. I think there definitely is a trust problem with the media. I think a big part of it is there's kind of, other people have said this and it kind of feels like a cliche now, but this kind of search for narratives rather than facts. The thing that makes a good feature writer is the kind of narrative complexity and how it fits in with sort of the pieties of right-thinking liberals. It's sort of this. It's the story of guys like Wesley Lowery. I mean, is there? I don't think he's added very much through his reporting, but it certainly it scratches the itch of liberal readers in a big way. And I also think this kind of the tight link between the intelligence services and certain journalistic outlets, including The Atlantic and Politico. That's the sort of thing that really gets my noggin jogging, and it makes me think that these institutions are not trustworthy. But on the other hand, it sort of makes me wonder if anybody really cares about that. That's sort of the cynical side of me. This one journalist drives me nuts, Natasha Bertrand, and she played a big role in a lot of the Russiagate reporting. She was at The Atlantic for a while. I believe she's at Politico now. But she's very obviously just a pass-through for, I guess, John Brennan or people like that.
Just to be clear, Cathy, do you know this journalist that Arthur's talking about?
I've seen her on Twitter. I don't know her personally now.
Yeah, I mean,
I think I follow her on Twitter, but yeah,
I have no reason to think I have no reason to think she's a bad journalist or a bad person or anything like that. It's just that she's an obvious conduit for the left-wing part of the deep state. And that's certainly we had. I have to say this because I suspect Cathy isn't going to want to go here, and I want to hear you respond to this. I think there were so many stories of the Trump years that turned out to be just wholly fabricated.
Oh God, so many.
From Trump trashing the troops to the Russian bounties on Afghan troops. So many of these to Russiagate really itself. These stories that turned out to be just wholly fabricated.
Right. Well, I mean, do you want to get into a debate about Russiagate? Because we could debate Russiagate, but
wait, Cathy, you believe
really
in
far
Russiagate?
off the main. Yeah, I mean, do you want to finish your point? Because I have my own.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Right. Well, I mean, I think I agree that there were certain narratives about Trump where like everybody was willing to believe the worst. I mean, I am someone who is extremely anti-Trump, but I mean, I've defended him on like certain points, like for instance, when just to give you one example, where there was the story that went out that supposedly he was, you may remember this, he was in a meeting with sheriffs, I think, and the claim was that he had referred to migrants as animals, like he had said, these people are just animals. There was this clip that quickly went viral. And, it turned out, and I wrote about this in my column in Newsday, that he was actually referring to like homicidal gang members who had committed like really horrendous murders. So this was really taken out of context. And if you look at the entire transcript, again, it's pretty clear that, he was referring to gang members. So, yeah, I mean, there were stories that I think were incredibly blown out of proportion. I think, like, in terms of Russiagate, I think that there was certainly there was a narrative of Trump basically being a Russian asset, which, for the record, like, I never bought. I always thought, like, the P-tape story was extremely, extremely dubious.
Like the Seth Abramson, is that his name? The guy that made his career?
Yeah, Seth Abramson.
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, but I mean, that's Seth Abramson is really not like, I mean, most people in the mainstream media were making fun of Seth.
He's like a performance artist almost.
But he's a synecdoche for an entire style of resistance.
Yeah, but I mean, Seth Abramson is not like, and this is the point that I'm going to get to. I think that there is a kind of corresponding narrative on the right, which conflates a lot of like mainstream Russiagate coverage with this really crazy stuff that was being pushed by, people like Seth Abramson, that was being pushed by people like, Rachel Maddow or, Louise Mensch. And Louise Mensch, by the way, was a conservative at one point, but and she actually offered me a job once, which is a whole other story. But,
what a mensch!
No, it's really funny because Louise, remember when she had Heat Street? It was this outfit.
Yeah, it was like the rival to Breitbart at one point.
And Louise actually offered me a job. Like she wanted me to be her like second in command at Heat Street, and I swear, this is before like everyone realized that Louise Mensch was kind of nuts, and I went in for a meeting with her. And I remember saying to my friend, like, yeah, she's offering me this really well-paying job, but I mean, there's this vibe about her that is just really like rubbing me the wrong way. So I didn't take the job. And I mean, partly it was also because like basically the requirement was that I was going to have to stop writing for everybody else. Like Heat Street was going to have to be like my only outlet. And I thought, like I'm basically going to like tank my whole network that I've spent years building up. Anyway, so going back to, so these were people who were saying things like, oh, like any day now, Trump is going to get arrested. And, like the marshal of the Supreme Court, I think that was.
It mirrors like the any day now, 2 weeks, he's going to get back into office. Sort of.
Yeah. So I mean, there was that whole like really crazy narrative, like Trump is Putin's bitch, like he's literally like an agent reporting to, which is, ludicrous, and I always thought it was. On the other hand, I think that first of all, like a lot of the, it's really actually not true that the majority of the mainstream media were embracing that narrative. I think most of the claims, most of the Russiagate claims that you see in places like, the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, etc., I think were really much more limited, which is that, there were these very shady connections between the Trump campaign and, the Russians. And, the Russians probably fed the Trump campaign some of this, oppo stuff on Hillary Clinton that, I think the whole question revolved around the fact, the question of, did the Trump people know that this was like stuff coming from the Russians and, okayed by Putin? And here's the thing, and this is because this is again where I think there's a, bad left-wing narrative, that, Trump is Putin's bitch. And there's a bad, like, right-wing narrative, which is that, like, the Russiagate was a total hoax. I mean, it is actually not a hoax that, there were Russians who were sort of helping the Trump campaign.
I would say that I would say vaguely more to the center-right governments, whether they're in they're neoliberal or not, like Putin, like Bolsonaro, like Trump, that they would, embrace each other. But JR,
No, but aside from that, I mean, it is actually true that the Trump campaign was kind of, crawling with people who had a lot of like really shady connections to the Russians. And it is true that, the WikiLeaks, which is a Russian asset, I mean, I think that's just, that's a fact.
Wow.
No, seriously. I don't think anyone seriously knows.
There's that email, I believe.
No. WikiLeaks.
Wait.
Asset. I mean, that's.
I mean, the way that I.
They didn't start out as a Russian asset, but I think.
Okay, but the way that I would look at it, Cathy, is that regardless of where exactly it came from, if we can establish that certain things, unless they are absolute fabrications, are in fact legitimate things that are already out there, then those are things that are worth looking into, regardless of where they came from.
Well, hang on, though. I mean, the thing, first of all, the question
if they're already out in the ether, I mean. Like,
yeah, I mean, are they legitimate things, or are they being spun as something that they're not? Because, like, a lot of the stuff that was in the Clinton emails, like the stuff that got spun as, Hillary's people, like deliberately tanking Bernie Sanders, a lot of that was very, and, I'm really not a great fan of Hillary Clinton. I'm even less of a fan of Bernie Sanders. But, I mean, a lot of that stuff actually was taken out of context because, like, a lot of the the nasty stuff that various DNC people said about Bernie Sanders, that was actually after he had already lost the nomination, so that was not like them trying to undermine him when he was still in.
Well, I agree
Well,
with my...
even
anyway,
the
I don't want to get
even
into all those details.
yeah, I just want to say even Tony Soprano uses a payphone and tries speaking in the basement, instead of speaking in the living
anyway,
room.
so real quick point. I mean, it is actually not true that Robert Mueller found that there was nothing whatsoever to Russiagate. I mean, he basically found that, the Russians were feeding stolen, data from the DNC to the Trump campaign. Trump people tried to get it from, actively sought to get it from them. Roger Stone was, in the middle of all this, and he really wanted to get his hands on that stuff. What they didn't find, and this is where the no collusion, Trump, because Trump was really hammering on it, no collusion. So there was no pre-planned, the Trump people didn't conspire ahead of time with the Russians to steal that information, and because of that, you can't really say that there was no conspiracy to hack the DNC, for instance. There was, I think it's pretty clear, if you look at the Trump Tower meeting with Don Jr., there were people in the Trump campaign who definitely knew that that Putin wanted to help elect Trump, and were really happy to get their hands on that information. So, is that nothing? I wouldn't say that that's nothing.
Well, it's different. Let's go to Bloom. Let's go to Arthur Bloom.
It's certainly very different from the way it was sold. The main thing I'd push back on, you're trying to make a distinction between the Louise Menches of the world and the sort of mainstream respectable reporters. The trouble is, I'm not so sure that distinction is really all that valid. We've got on emails.
Well, it is if you look at the coverage, though.
But look, David Ignatius was used to take the kill shot on the Russiagate story. David Ignatius is probably the most famous national security reporter in the United States. This is not a Louise.
Okay, what did he say specifically? Because I don't remember that.
Oh, Kathy. Sorry. It's just
Arthur.
But yeah, I do know, for instance, that both the New York Times and the Washington Post at various times actually published front page stories shooting down claims of connections between the Trump campaign and Russia.
Right.
It's really not true that they were all in on this and doing whatever.
Well, I want to
let Arthur make his point, please.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, Kathy. It's just
No, okay. I just think we've got an email, senior intelligence officials saying take the kill shot, referring to the story that David Ignatius did. And they're talking about using the most prominent national security reporter in the country as the kill shot in the Russiagate story. That's collusion between the intelligence agencies and the very tip top, the most prestigious part of the mainstream media in the Russiagate story. And you also have some of the bad reporting that the Atlantic did. They were the ones who cooked up the Russian bounties story. These stories are just, there are partisan people within, call it the deep state, call it the intelligence agencies, call it DOD, whatever, that are colluding with the most powerful parts of the mainstream media to tell fake stories. I think that's a serious problem. To point that out that isn't a right-wing narrative. I just think these stories didn't hold up. It's
right, but can I just quickly respond to that? Because my point about the right-wing narrative isn't that. I certainly am not disputing that Intel people and people in various administrations have fed stories to the mainstream media. I think that was always true. No, the narrative that I'm referring to is this idea that first of all that there was nothing whatsoever to Russiagate, and that the mainstream media as a whole were sort of strongly pushing this sort of maximum bad version of the Russian
Kathy,
narrative.
I want to get more of a top-down view of this entire situation. Since one of the things that Arthur was talking about was this connection that you also pointed out with the intelligence apparatus of the United States and journalism. We could say that either, oh, there's going to always be this element. I think the reason why a lot of Americans today are getting very sick and tired of journalism in general, at least mainstream journalism, is their concern is that it's not just here and there. Their biggest concern is that what's been going on, for God knows how long, has been a much more,
Robert Nozick getting fed stories about Howard
a much
Flame
more
Wilson.
concentrated version of this, which they see as being very antithetical to the kind of government that we should have. So I'm curious, Cathy, what is your perspective on how much of this type of collusion goes on between various intelligence agencies, government officials, and the corporate media today?
And then I want to get to Average Centrist after, and then Slav.
All right. Yeah, well, first of all, I'm not sure what collusion really means in this context, because, obviously the media, like the sort of established media, get their news, a lot of their news from official sources. Do they often not sufficiently fact check those? Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that we have, by the way, similar claims on the left, the sort of the pro Black Lives Matter, contingent, for instance, saying that a lot of the time, like when it comes to coverage of crime, the sort of the establishment media take the police version of a story to be sort of gospel, and that's reported at like what really happened. And I think that's also true, probably.
And BLM takes the words of their activists as gospel as well.
Of course, but this is my point. Like, the critics have their own narrative where certain things are taken as gospel.
Yeah, but this is much more important, I think, since this concerns the well-being of our entire country. If we have a situation of who is watching the Watchmen, if we have a situation where we have people in power that people are not necessarily trusting, and they're not trusting the media either.
Think that's what Average Centrist you wanted to talk about.
Yes, go for it.
Go for it. Yeah.
Oh, well, I don't know. I guess I'm taking a bit more of an outsider perspective here because obviously I'm in the UK. It's a different, I mean, our media is kind of similar, but not quite the same. But I'm pretty clued up on the American media. The thing that I've noticed I don't know the specifics of some of the stuff that you're talking about right now with some of these stories, so I can't speak to that. But when I would notice some of the stuff that was coming around with Trump in 2015, 2016, is that there was a massive boy that cried wolf situation that was going on. And I think that when we're talking about mistrust with the public, I think that's like a massive problem. Like, it's a huge, huge problem because like it means that basically there's no real standard of truth that goes out to the public. And when that happens, that means that everyone and their mum is becoming a conspiracy theorist. Like, honestly, like I know basic bitch mums that are literally coming out with like the craziest motherfucking shit you've never heard in your fucking life that I would never have heard of a year or two ago. But only because of lockdowns and all kinds of like, I guess you could call it post-truth kind of stuff. Like the media have kind of warped reality. Like, I don't know, I'm not saying this is all journalists or anything like that, but in the political sphere, they have manipulated people into really weird positions. And it's hard to put it into words, man. I just think it's going in a really weird direction. And I think part of like what we're seeing today in terms of like anti-lockdown protests, all this kind of stuff, like, I like the way the left wing is, the way the right wing is, the QAnon, like all this kind of stuff. All these people, I feel like the media is at the heart of it all. Like they generate a, how do you really put it into words? Sorry, I didn't expect to be brought on so suddenly, but
no problem at all.
Apparatus of suspicion and sort of a worship of expertism, I think, is what people really
If I could say a couple of words in praise of British journalism. The thing that I appreciate about British journalism is it does have a little bit more liveliness. The thing that drives me nuts about American journalism is how insanely professionalized it is. When Politico was getting started, they specifically made their pitch as a publication to they wanted to be the ESPN of politics, and
Oh yes,
that's exactly what I can't stand. Turning it into a matter of sort of facts and figures, and as if you're running a sports book or like a I don't know, stats matrix or something like that. The thing that British journalism does right is it's a little bit more gossipy, and it just feels more human to me. Maybe that's
they're very savage. I'm not gonna lie, like they're fucking
sure, yeah.
savage, I'm not gonna lie.
But I also want But I also want to make sure. Wait. Before we get to Slav, I wanted to get a response from Cathy as well. I just want to make sure, Cathy, that you understand average centrist views here. Like, why?
No, I do. My view is really sort of, in a way, kind of conflicted, you might say, because in terms of the whole like establishment journalism versus the kind of more freewheeling kind of citizen journalism stuff, where it's not necessarily like expert opinion. I think both of those really have their pitfalls, because the thing is, like, when I was beginning my career in journalism, it was really like much more kind of dominated by the sort of mainstream opinions, and obviously there were other opinions that were kind of presented on the op-ed page often, but there was a much stronger kind of sense of, well, this is the consensus and this is what the experts say, and I think a lot of the time this consensus did sort of reflect basic facts, but on the other hand, I also know that there were things with sort of left of center narratives that really did result in completely inaccurate things being taken as reality. Like, because I first came across this when I was doing a lot of research on feminism and sort of how the media would uncritically channel certain activist feminist narratives. There were these completely bogus, factoids about, for instance, how, battering by men is the number one cause of injury to women seen in emergency rooms, which basically came from press releases by these, feminist groups, and was just completely uncritically picked up by major newspapers. There was similar stuff where, like, at one point there was a figure of like supposedly 3 million homeless people. This was in the Reagan era. And this was a figure that, as it later turned out, was apparently kind of made up on the spot by an activist who was testifying before Congress, and then just, again, like, got into all of the major media. So, I mean, I'm certainly aware of the fact that, like, professionalism does not guarantee.
Well, these are more examples that you bring up of kind of like oopsies, of screw-ups, where, we just listened to the wrong person, they were full of crap, we're going to try better next time. What I'm curious about, Cathy, and then I want to get to Trustworthy, Slav, as well, what I'm curious about is, do you see any examples, and I would also love to hear from Arthur, do you see any examples of there being more top-down things that, let's say, come from prestigious universities that are, let's say, in a certain way, and again, not the level of Russia, but I'm basically saying I don't want America to become Russia, which is what I'm talking about, it, basically where intelligence agencies, government officials would have certain narrative spun that they use the media as a mouthpiece for.
This is where I think my perspective differs, because I think a lot of the time, it's a much more complicated relationship than this, because, like, for instance, if you take like these bad stats on domestic violence that I just mentioned, like, there is a certain feedback loop between the activists and certain circles in government, especially more Democrats on some issues, more Republican on other issues, where people in government uncritically recycle advocacy-driven claims by activists, and then it all kind of filters down to the media. So, I mean, my concern isn't so much about, top-down stuff necessarily as about the sort of vicious circle of a feedback loop that just results in kind of bullshit.
Just to be clear, when you're saying that, I agree. But when I say top-down, I don't even mean top-down in the Russian sense of there being a commissar that tells you what to do. I mean top-down, again, going back to this idea of how could the experts possibly be wrong, where we have these same resonances even happening right now, even happening with what happened with Joe Rogan recently. I mean, still, Cathy, I was speaking to, and again, we're not going to use the words here because we don't want to get shut down by the YouTube police, but I was speaking to my doctor, who is a highly accredited doctor, and he has a much more nuanced take on a lot of these different things if we're talking about that particular thing that Joe Rogan took here. But I keep seeing story after story that keeps being regurgitated that never talks about anything other than the horse angle, which is completely not true, that being the only part of it. Yeah,
this is something Mr. Hand's pace.
Yes, yet this is something that keeps being regurgitated. So when I take a look at that, I go with the Adam Carolla saying of stupid or liar. So Cathy, which one is it? Is it stupid or is it liar?
Well, I'm sorry, you kind of lost me here.
To regurgitate the points about this particular product that Joe Rogan used only being used for horses. So
I think that's just, I don't know. I think people just think it's kind of a really good singer. So, and I think a lot of people because of that probably do believe that. But, I mean, I think that's
you don't see there being any malfeasance from the pharmaceutical industry, anything that would push certain things into that direction.
No, sorry. Nah, I really don't buy that whole thing at all. Because, I mean, I have...
Here's one last thing, Gio. Here's how I could possibly bridge that gap, because Cathy, I'm on your side pretty much when it comes to also not believing that some pharma exec came into the office and started. Right. No, what I'm basically saying is going back to that same idea of there being this bubble, there being this consensus of only trusting the experts. So as a default, certain things that are propagated, by big pharma companies that also have relationships to universities.
Let me just tell you real quick, because I did not have like a preset opinion on this. Having read because I've followed some of that debate, and I mean I'm really pretty convinced that the quote unquote expert side on this is correct. But let me can I just make a real quick point, because I think when we're talking about the dangers of too much professionalism, and too much listening to the established experts, which obviously has its bad sides. On the other hand, I think that when you kind of adopt too much of a sort of fuck the gatekeepers attitude, and you can have basically anyone come in saying anything and claiming equal credibility, I mean that has a lot of dangers. Let me just give you a real quick example of something that happened in 2005 when I was blogging and also writing for the Boston Globe. So there was at Oklahoma University, a student committed suicide by the rather unusual means of basically blowing himself up with a bomb. He actually bought explosives, put on a backpack, sat down on a bench outside a football stadium and blew himself up. And then some people started spreading the rumor. This was, remember, we're 4 years after 9/11, so people are still really jittery about radical Islamist activism. And some people, some bloggers, including for instance Michelle Malkin, start spreading this rumor that I don't know where it originated, but basically the idea was that this guy was actually a would-be suicide terrorist who supposedly had tried to gain entrance to the football stadium because there was a game going on at the time, and supposedly what he had actually wanted was to blow himself up in the football stadium, taking out God knows how many people. And there were these stories about how he was supposedly a secret convert to Islam, and the evidence for this was completely ridiculous. Was at one point he had a Muslim roommate. Okay, well, I mean that's obviously highly incriminating. Oh, he lived 3 blocks away from a mosque. Well, all right. So yeah, so there were these people, and I mean, this was really not like funny, because here was this guy who had committed suicide in a really horrible way, and apparently had left a note explaining his reasons, and his family was obviously devastated. And then there were these people like circulating these rumors all over the place about how he was actually a would-be terrorist. And, the FBI said pretty early on that, there's absolutely no reason, like the claims that there was footage of him trying to get into the stadium didn't pan out. Like the claims that he had like supposedly like a stash of terrorist literature in his apartment didn't pan out. And, the FBI was basically saying, right away, like there's absolutely no reason to believe that, he was a terrorist. And there was, at the time, there were also a lot of people on the right, like, Michelle Malkin being one of them, who believed that, there was a deliberate effort to downplay Islamic terrorism, so as not to project the idea that like we're waging a war on Muslims. So there was a lot of like real kind of paranoia about this.
This was actually a plot in an episode of, I think it was an Australian show, lawyer show. I think it was called Rake, where it was like that really? Exact thing. Yeah.
So let me just finish like a real quick point, because I'm about to wrap up what I'm saying. And so eventually, like all of this got completely shut down. And I wrote a piece basically saying, look, this is where you really need to be careful and responsible, because we have these people with blogs who are just blowing this stuff, no pun intended, blowing the stuff completely out of proportion, and causing like not only causing tremendous paranoia on the campus where people think, oh my god, this guy was about to blow us all up, but also causing like really severe anguish to a family that had already lost its son, brother, etc. And there were people basically coming out and saying, well, we're not like professional journalists, we can't really be expected to fact check everything. We're just, we hear something and we put it on a blog, and then you investigate it. Yeah, well, that's kind of like, I mean,
that's why we have
to get to Slav, and then I want to ask a point
we're going to get to Slav, but real quick, I wanted to say that's why we have people like Styx Hexenhammer 666, who's going to be debating Joel Davis soon. But what Styx does, Cathy, is he loves archiving all the news stories that come up. Number one, so that the press magazine organizations don't get any money. But number two, so that people can't go and, let's say, edit a certain article where at first there is a much spicier headline, which is wrong, but then you edit it so that after the fact it's actually different, in case, you intentionally misled or unintentionally misled someone. So when people see things like that, they're going to gravitate towards people like Styx, who, even though he didn't have a journalism license, he studied botany or something, I think, in Vermont. He is somebody that people end up naturally trusting just from the process of him doing as much due diligence as possible in order to get to the facts. There's going to be people who are going to go to Yahoos. There's going to be people who are going to go to all sorts of people that are going to have bad takes or wrong takes. But I still think, number one, the cream should rise to the top, and number two, we're seeing a hell of a lot of censorship from big tech when it comes to not censoring outright, but basically demoting all the non-professionals and promoting all the professionals in terms of like Fox News, CNN, MSNBC in the front page of people's feeds. So that's something that I have a problem with. I think that a free market that you are also in favor of, Cathy, would be able to raise all ships without this manipulation. But let's get to Slav. Slav, you were
then I want to
here.
get Jareth into the expertism, and I want to ask the panel a question on journalism.
Yes.
So Slav, go away. I know you're going to absolutely shred the whole chat. So.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, awesome. Well, yeah, how's it going, guys? I don't even know where to start. Give me something, give me something to go on here.
Well, just the thing we were talking about
Host
earlier
of the
regarding the
Fedpost,
expert.
Trustworthy Slav. Well, co-host of the Fedpost.
Yeah. Okay. I'll do the narcissism thing first. Yeah, I am Trustworthy Slav. I record a podcast with my friends. I'm going to call them friends at this point.
For now,
it's the Fedpost.
Friends with benefits, yes.
Friends with benefits. I don't know. People call us post-left. I just, in post-left fashion, I don't really subscribe to this this label. But yeah, a lot of interesting discussion going on. I literally actually already have like a page worth of notes of what I was just listening to already. Happy to be here. Sorry for being late, though I am happy to be fashionably late. I'm hoping that my display picture is coming up for somebody.
No, it's not.
Okay.
Not.
Well, it's no shortage of effort on my part going into.
That's
I tried.
okay.
Anyways, I got the at there. I appreciate you adjusting it. But yeah, happy to be here.
And just really, what is your thoughts thus far on the state of journalism and some of the things that you want to discuss?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so like centrist, I didn't want to. This is like the one place where I don't cut in and interrupt people. But average centrist, you were kind of you were touching on something that I did want to jump in on because it felt like you just didn't get it quite over the finish line, which which is I mean, no offense or anything, but which is really I mean, the corporate media is lying in the bed that they've fucking made. And like when we're talking about like normie soccer moms going full on QAnon or whatever, which like for the record is completely like a fed honeypot, like it's,
or blue anon, depending on the district.
Right. Well, I mean, we were already talking about Russiagate, right? Yeah. Like trusting yahoos in itself, average people doing that is an indictment of the media establishment. And like honestly, it seems like I'm wasting time talking on this because it's just such a fucking obvious thing. Now, if we're talking about like, I definitely appreciate how dubious it is to always side with the underdog. It's the little guy can do no wrong, must slave morality, right? I understand that especially, I'm really still technically of the left. I understand that that's really a popular thing that you run into there, right? But when it comes to media and everything like that, yeah, I mean, this more than anything, of course, there's fault to go around, but more than anything, it's the corporate media's bed that they've made to lie in. And if we're talking about serious differences between these two lanes of like alternative media done by the little guy or whatever, like I feel fucking cringe saying the little guy all the time, but establishment versus independent, I mean, it really is at the end of the day, just the primary difference in my mind is just who has resources to actually be doing investigation, right? And that really is kind of what really sorts people in journalism generally. Also, just as a side thing, Cathy it seemed like, and correct me if I'm wrong here, again, I'm coming in a little bit late, but it seemed like, we're talking about the security state with Russiagate, which like in my mind is it's just like the stupid, boring sequel to like WMD's narrative. We're talking about the security state, and then it seemed like Cathy kind of used activists as kind of like a counterexample to the security state. And I think that that's kind of a false, I think that that's kind of a false arrangement there, because I think that the activist class, which is what it is, and maybe that wasn't the case when we're talking about wife beating in the Reagan era or something like that, but like the activist class is just as much a part of the consent making apparatus as the security state is. And so like, yeah, I don't really see any issue there in pointing out a double standard with listening to BLM activists or listening to some fucking military industrial complex ghoul. I'm sorry, I don't know if we're being irreverent or not. I'll be the irreverent.
No, I want to make sure Cathy gets a chance to respond to that. So, Cathy.
JR.
But I think, I'm not sure what the criticism is, because I think this is kind of what I was saying, that there's a feedback loop between the activist class and the government in many cases. So I'm not sure there's a disagreement.
I don't see a distinction personally.
I think there's a class of like advocacy groups that, often, by the way, including people in academia who are regarded as like the professionals, and who often do have, do have this sort of symbiosis or symbiotic relationship.
Well,
just like in the security state,
so I'm not
which
really
we
sure
would call
that we're
collusion.
disagreeing here.
Well, Slav, can you then expand a little bit about what you see as the big disagreement between you and Cathy when it comes to how she sees these two groups?
Well, like I said, I was coming in a little bit late there, so I might have been. As I was saying, it seemed like your framing was to basically say, like, well, something gets said about this, but nothing gets said about the other. From where I'm sitting, I don't really see that being the case at all. Perhaps your framing wasn't exactly that.
No, I think I was responding to Lev, basically saying that he's interested in like bad narratives promoted by government rather than, activists. And my point was that often there's like not a whole lot of daylight between the two. So I think.
Okay, if that's your case, then we're in.
Yeah, I think.
There we go.
As someone said in the chat, who was it? VG said zero discussion of the effectiveness of corporatism and international liberalism on the field of journalism. So I wanted to get J. Arthur Bloom's take, and then I wanted to ask a more broader question about journalism itself. But what is your getting the discussion, J. Arthur? What has been your?
Sure. Yeah. I guess the way I think about this problem is the big power that journalism has that nobody else has is the power to privilege the question. What is allowed to be talked about and what isn't. And it's not so much a matter like there's a pretty wide range of opinions that are allowed on any given question, not on everything, but you're allowed to disagree. But the way it's possible to control what things can be talked about, like what subjects, I think is very important. And I think the biggest revelation for me there was COVID, because we just started to find out. There was a big story in The Intercept. It was promoted as a huge scoop that they had just gotten all these files showing that the Wuhan lab had received U.S. government funding.
By the way, we got all right, that's fine. That's fine.
Let's say the lab in that certain place.
Yes.
Yeah, just OPSEC. Yeah.
Is that a YouTube thing?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a YouTube.
Oh, the lab. I'm
Fuck
sorry.
YouTube, man. They're fucking cunts, aren't they?
The lab in China.
Whoa, watch your language there.
Sorry. Is that a thing?
He's British. They give him a pass.
All right. Yeah, it's a Cathy. It's a British thing.
But this is partly what I mean,
I'm
right?
not offended.
I think we can talk.
Sorry,
about
I thought we were all adults here.
I think nowadays you can talk about it. Yeah, you can
talk about it now because we've gotten permission to, and we
that's right. Jon Stewart screamed about it.
Yeah, we got permission after some of these stories, especially the Intercept one. Now we're allowed to talk about how this lab probably received U.S. government funding. And before that, there was the big New York Post story. The New York Post ran this very lengthy, very well done story about how the lab leak theory isn't crazy. And that was months after conservatives were talking about this. They basically had this story almost entirely back in like April of 2020, like right when the pandemic started. Well, in retrospect, yeah. And but it's what questions you're allowed to consider at any given time. You're a crank if you were talking about the things almost 2 years ago now that are now allowed to be discussed by normal people. It's about when you talk about it. I've got a couple of normie liberal friends, and I texted them. We were talking about just some random things. And COVID came up, and I texted them, wait until you find out that this came out of a Chinese lab that received U.S. government funds. And they all came back to me and they said, you don't really believe that, do you? And nowadays it's it's sort of the prevailing theory. And so I think the superpower that journalists have is the ability to privilege the question. And that has implications for a lot of different things, including politics. This sort of, even the sort of portrait that you have in your mind of Trump, of he's like this authoritarian who is throwing the Constitution out the window. General
Milley had to do what he had to do to
exactly
protect the Republic.
They're able to put that caricature in your head, and that becomes the terms of the debate. Like either you're a loyalist. That was the term that you saw a lot around January 6th. The people that liked Trump were loyalists. A little bit like, the diehard followers of some tin pot dictator. That was the language that they used. So it's how they talk about things and when you're allowed to talk about them that are super important.
Well, I wanted to get Cathy's response to that as well, because like I always say, Cathy, I really value being an American. I love this country, and I don't want this country to turn into a totalitarian dictatorship like Russia, which is exactly why I think the things that Arthur is bringing up right now are very important. And I'm curious.
Just to give context, Lev, like just really quickly without getting us banned, let's say Zio Anthony, that means uncle in Italian. You know who I'm talking about.
Hey.
If you remember I want to say it was 10 years later, it was 1999, the story that came out in Spin magazine. And I know the journalist in question was kind of a nutbar later on, but it was more or less true about what was happening during that other health crisis in the 80s that involved him. Not to get into it too much. But yeah, Cathy, go ahead. Then I wanted to ask a broader question. Yeah.
Right. Well, I just want to say, again, as I said at the beginning, I do agree that there was a tendency to, blow up some of these stories about Trump, like the example that I gave was where supposedly, he referred to migrants as animals, and it turned out that, it was actually, he was talking about gang members who were, who had repeatedly, killed a lot of people and so on. So, I'm certainly not going to deny that, there were stories about the Trump administration that, where the Trump administration got a bum rap. I mean, I covered, for instance, the Betsy DeVos, rules on sexual assault on campus, where it was like, oh my God, Betsy DeVos, wants all the rapists to, go free and so on. And in fact, if there was even like, there was a feminist law professor at Harvard who basically said, like these rules, if they weren't coming out of the Trump administration, most people wouldn't really see a problem with them because they're basically about, restoring some of the balance and, giving some priority to the rights of the accused and so on. So, I think definitely there were like this narrative that, oh my God, like under Trump, we're all 5 minutes away from fascism. Yeah, like that's, there was a lot of really kind of ridiculous stuff like that. At the same time, again, like I think the narrative that I see from a lot of people, not only on the right, but even among some people on the left who question, who are sort of in a position of dissent from the mainstream media, like Glenn Greenwald. I mean, there is this really, equally false, I think, narrative of January 6th as, oh, it was really just a few retired people who, walked past the velvet ropes, in the Capitol building. And
what was it?
Well, we got video evidence against
Wait, hold on. Arthur?
What was it then? What was January 6th?
So you don't think that there were actually like really violent people who injured?
No.
Like,
Of course it was.
I mean, there was probably glow in the darks. Like there was probably people who I would say were.
No, I wouldn't say just.
I mean, there's like video evidence of people. I know that it turned out that Brian Sicknick, the cop who died, actually died of a stroke.
No, but there was an FBI report that was done after the fact. Well, Cathy, there was an FBI report that was done after the fact that talked about what exactly went on and who the perpetrators were that were doing the violence.
I'll give you an example. They lied about the guy with the handcuff zip ties. He just found it on the ground. He didn't.
Well, first of all, you don't necessarily know that they lied. I mean, it may very well be that they.
Call it an educated guess.
We're saying like, guys.
I think we interrupted J. Arthur, and then I wanted.
Yeah, there were like what I think something like 300 cops who were injured.
Well, we're going into various thoughts right now. One of make sure.
bump their head on the way out of the building. I mean,
come on, dude, stop. You know, I mean,
wait, hold on.
Yeah, but to say that this was like
there's literally
some kind of subversive.
Being dragged downstairs and beaten with a flagpole.
Sorry, wait, hold on. Did anybody read the FBI report that came out after this that actually said who exactly were the people that were responsible for knocking in the door, going in there, and then who were the people who, let's say, officers were not really giving any budge towards, who thought, oh, the door's open, I might as well go in? Because those are separate groups of people, right, Cathy? So who were those people that the FBI report was talking about being the ones who actually rammed in, went in, and were actually not just like Joe Average? So who exactly were they?
In the
FBI report.
Tell me.
Well, in the FBI, did you read the FBI report?
No, actually.
Arthur, did you read the FBI report?
No.
Okay, see, this is what I'm talking about, guys. Like, we're all supposed to be on the same page with these things. I should have read the FBI report myself, but my point is that we talk about this stuff, and we do have a certain
did you read the
consensus.
FBI report?
I kind of deny the premise that the FBI report is the be-all, end-all.
At least it's something. At least it's
this
something.
Is Warren Commission.
Okay,
but
I mean,
again,
I'm not aware of a big FBI
the
report.
thing is, like, the way that you said, have you read the FBI report? Like, you sounded like you were gonna, deliver
I heard about it.
Bombshell based on the FBI report.
I heard about it, and one of the big takeaways was basically that there was no real founding of any kind of organized thing going on.
Right, no, that I know. I mean, I've read.
It's not really an insurrection. It's not.
There were some suspicious people, though, I would say, just to be fair. One of them is like a. Never mind. I'm just gonna bash an celebrity.
I mean, I'll just say now, like,
I could get very conspiratorial with this bit.
Go for it, lad. Let's fucking have it.
Then we'll get to Slav.
So the thing that I get conspiratorial about on January 6th is what happened to Ashley Babbitt's body from the time she leaves the speaker's lobby, or the antechamber to the speaker's lobby, because we don't know anything about her whereabouts from the moment she leaves the antechamber to the speaker's lobby until her ashes appear in a Gateway Pundit video. Gateway Pundit got the exclusive for her ashes scattering. And nobody can account for where and who gave permission for her being cremated. These cremations, as a trad sympathetic person, I'm very against cremation.
Yes, me too.
Devout Christians, Jews, and Muslims should all be against cremation. So I think, like, as a society, we should all just be against it. But, Brian Sicknick was the first time ashes have ever lain in state in the Capitol. We've never done that before. And I'm not conspiratorial about Sicknick. I think that one's pretty clear that he wasn't beaten to death with a fire extinguisher. But Ashley Babbitt, what happened to the body? The family has not told anything about, their interactions with officials. They're suing over it, but they've been very tight-lipped. I think it's very strange. I think it's strange that we know so little about a violent death in the seat of government. We should know a lot about that, and we hardly know anything. And you can look at the big piece of footage that's relevant here is the Jaden X footage. What strikes me about that whole video, Jaden X, he was later arrested. He's actually like an Antifa kind of guy, or like a BLM activist. But if you watch his footage, what stands out to me is how peaceful everybody is. It's especially the ones inside the building. I mean, they're literally reasoning with the cops. Like,
are those the same guys who were seen like chasing one of the cops up the stairs? I mean, come on.
That must have been in a different place, but I mean, you don't see any of that there. They're
but I mean, I'm sure you can find like any video of a generally violent event. You can find some pockets of it.
It's about degrees.
Mostly peaceful protest, Cathy.
I mean, I think it is a mostly peaceful protest.
Fiery, but mostly peaceful.
To make this
I mean, I certainly agree that the mainstream media, and I think this is one of the issues where I think the credibility of the media, because I think we're on a slightly different wavelength here. You probably me and several of you, or all of you, because I mean, I'm really not so concerned about the sort of top down deep state stuff. I'm more concerned about the media just out of ideological prejudice, embracing certain narratives where, certain inconvenient facts are left out, like,
isn't that a
top-down thing? Why aren't you concerned?
Isn't that the top-down thing that we're talking about, though? Is them completely manipulating that situation using using half-truths and not actually saying things. It is what it is. It's a manipulation. They're literally manipulating the minds of people by leaving out key facts on purpose.
Or
they do
is
it on
it
purpose.
just sort of,
No, they do it on purpose. Come on, they're not that thick.
No,
they're
but that's a good question. Hold on. That's
I wanted
a
to
good
get
question.
Slav and then
wait, hold on, Gio.
I think that there's a very good question about, are they doing it on purpose, or is
this seems more lively than anticipated.
So, Cathy, no, this is great. This is great, Cathy.
I think that there's no question at all.
Yeah.
I don't think that it's rocket science figuring out like whether or not it's like on purpose or whatever. Like, I think that I can confidently say that this is whether there is an awareness on the part of the press or not. This is people acting intuitively on their class interests. That's what it is. It's class politics. And that's what it is.
I mean, I'm not a Marxist.
Here's an example.
I don't really buy class.
No, and I could have guessed that. That's fine. It's just that seems like your citizen
they're
journalists.
Provincial, like flyover state people that are icky and racist. And,
well, here's an example.
You have journalists, for example, that were calling for like even Dan Rather calling like we should erect a gallows in Washington and hang all of the people that went into the Capitol. Like there are journalists that like say these things.
No, but again, without going into those extremes, though.
And I think it's a little bit. I think it's a little bit hyperbolic to say that this has to be a purely Marxist insight, to say that like this like journalist class that basically wants to reform the disgusting proles in our nation, to act like, to point out that there's a class element in there. I don't really think.
No, here's how I can balance things out.
First of all, do you think that they want to reform the proles any more than they want to reform, the rich or whatever? I mean, I think.
No, I think they want to rotate the rich
nowadays.
I think anyway. So my point is that I'm really more I'm less concerned with the whatever narrative the government hands down, or the deep state or whatever, than I am with journalists, whether they do it consciously and deliberately or just out of unconscious bias, which I think is probably a much bigger problem, where they genuinely believe that they're doing the right thing, and doing things like downplaying the violence and the protests in the summer of 2020, which I think was a big issue. Like the whole, I mean, I totally agree that things like that whole like the peaceful protest, the mostly peaceful protest thing, I mean, that does a great deal to discredit the
and you don't think that was purposeful when they said that?
That's a real thing.
You don't think it was purposeful?
Yeah, on this note, I did tell Lev about this before.
Yes, I know you have to go real quick, Cathy. Cathy, hold on. One final question I have.
But you're a good sport, though, I gotta say.
You are amazing, and I just want to say, how do we go about finding out if it is one or the other? How do we go about finding out whether this is just people being in some headspace where they believe it to be the case versus there being certain top-down things? Like, surely there should be some documents we can all take a look at, various reports that are out there where we would be able to gain some kind of truth. My concern, Cathy, and the same for Arthur Bloom. I wish Arthur Bloom had somebody like you on his staff. Same, I wish that you had somebody like Arthur on his staff, because I'll be honest, I don't think that happens. And that's one of, I think, the biggest problems. Because I think if that did happen, then I think we'd be able to have a much clearer picture. It's not like somebody's suppressing it. It's just, no, I don't think you get a chance to think about it even, nor would Arthur get a chance to think about whatever points you may bring up.
I totally agree. And, I do think, by the way, that in the last, couple of years, I think there has been a more kind of organized effort in the mainstream media to push a certain narrative, and that's probably because of the rise of the sort of social justice activist class, which comes out of colleges and which now holds a lot of jobs in the media. And I think these are people who as opposed to merely just having sort of unconscious bias and skewing a certain way to certain stories, I think they really are a lot of them really do believe that they need to, they see themselves as like foot soldiers in a social justice revolution.
Do you mind if I make a point
that's a really
here?
dangerous trend.
Sorry to cut you off. Do you mind if I make a point here? Because what you're talking about, like with this unconscious bias type thing, I just don't really buy that, because when you look through American history, right back towards like Alexander
I guess I can
Hamilton.
hang around a couple of more minutes because
Sorry,
Kathy.
sorry. I don't mean to keep you too long,
I can hang around a couple of more minutes.
I just want to make a quick point. Like when you go back to Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr?
Yeah.
They used to have a feud, and that was like one of the first times in American history there was like a media mudslinging going on, and that set the tone for the media in America for literally hundreds of years after that. And like that was fully orchestrated. That was like fully orchestrated with political people involved with media people creating actual agendas to mudsling and slander the other person. And to me, it just seems a bit like wishful thinking to just say, oh, maybe they're just doing this, doing that. I don't think they're that stupid. I don't think they're that stupid.
Because I think this is where it's really kind of important to understand sort of the history of the media, because basically from most of American history, you're quite right. Like the media were very consciously partisan. There was a certain moment, after the end of World War II, where there really was, I think, this belief that the media should be objective, and that, and this is what I'm referring to as the sort of consensus that ended up forming. And yeah, this objectivity very often, ended up being a kind of faux objectivity, where there really was like the consensus reflected certain opinions that were really not as, reality based as people thought. But, I do think, and I say this from interacting with a lot of people in the media, that there really was a belief that, we are trying to be nonpartisan and, sort of capture objective reality. Now, the problem with that, of course, is that you can try to be nonpartisan, but if you don't recognize that you have certain biases, what you think is nonpartisanship is actually your own opinion. I'll give you an example, and then I'm really going to have to go. But I mean, this is like one conversation that I had personally. Like I was having lunch. This was around probably like 2005-06. I'm having lunch with one of my editors from the Boston Globe, where I wrote until 2007. And we're talking about like, nastiness in the media and, polarization and she says something about like, oh my God, isn't it horrible, how, mean-spirited and, rude and, and so on, Ann Coulter is. And, she, and I mean, I agree, by the way, I think Ann Coulter is really awful. And I mean, she says, really, really horrible things about people in a way that I think is completely unjustified. Anyway, so, we're talking about that. And then I said, well, there's also a lot of really, really unwarrantedly, personal and mean-spirited stuff in mainstream liberal media. And she's like, what, really? Like, where? And I said, well, like, for instance, here's this column by Maureen Dowd, of the New York Times about an affirmative action case at that had just been decided by the Supreme Court, in which Clarence Thomas basically said that, wrote in his, I think it was a dissent, or maybe it was a concurring opinion, I can't remember, but basically he wrote that affirmative action makes a lot of Black people feel stigmatized by feeling that their success is owed to sort of like special favors. And Maureen Dowd wrote a column saying, well, obviously you look at Clarence Thomas, and here's a man who has been driven barking mad, like these were her actual words, driven barking mad by the knowledge that, he only got his seat on the Supreme Court because of racial favoritism.
Oh, God.
Yeah, seriously. And I said, well, isn't that like as bad as anything that Ann Coulter has written? And my editor like literally looked at me and said, yeah, but that's true.
Oh God.
And I'm serious. I mean, I think she really like to her that was just sort of objective fact. And I thought, well, like, okay, all right. Obviously we have a sort of discrepancy. And she was like, yeah, and it's also funny, and like it's funny and it's true. So so I mean, I think that there really is. I mean, people do see things, and I'm not, by the way, going to say that, like everyone else has partisan blinders and I'm the only person in the world who is, sitting here, giving you the point of view from Mount Olympus. I mean, I'm sure I have my own biases.
I just gotta send you the Great Reset documents. Then everything will be
but
set
anyway,
straight.
so now I'm gonna have to go and like find my way back to Mount Olympus.
All right, Kathy, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Take care.
You've been a good sport. See you.
Okay.
A good sport.
Bye.
Bye. So
And
everybody, don't forget to subscribe. Patreon.com/breaktherules. We've got a lot of goodies for you. Look at this moth. Look at this beautiful. Look at this beautiful moth. Yeah, this is the Brittany Venti moth right here. Look at this beautiful piece of wood. So my father created this, and my father is a great artist, and this could be yours when you become a $20 patron to patreon.com/breaktherules. Hey, we're gonna be doing a reunion stream, I believe either next week or the week after. We're gonna get all the regulars together, and it should be a fun Average Centrist. I would love for you to come in. Also, I found out, Average Centrist, you are a big fan of wrestling, just like Gio. Is that right?
I am. I'm a huge fan of wrestling. Yeah.
We've got to put together a wrestling.
Yes, we do.
We've got to do it.
Arthur, are you a fan of wrestling?
Yeah.
No, but I used to edit Kane.
Wow.
Yeah,
Glenn Jacobs.
Glenn Jacobs. He's a libertarian mayor in Knox County now. I used to edit his columns occasionally. So
Nice.
no, I don't know anything about wrestling.
Well, I mean, it's pretty similar to politics, so
It's the real politics. I wanted to ask the panel, because my good friend Godward Podcast brought up an excellent point in the chat. He said a lot of journalists nowadays view themselves as the arbiters of the noble lie. I wanted to ask about the history, and Average Centrist, you brought up the history of American journalism. I would say because Arthur, you're familiar a bit with the history of journalism in America, in the 20th century. Let's say, what's the school you would call it? Like the new journalism of Hunter S. Thompson, Tom Wolfe, Norman Mailer, where the journalism itself transforms into a literary art form and is subject to a sort of form of narrativization. Do you think that that's still pertinent nowadays? Because it seems that a lot of journalists, when you especially read their Twitter feeds, they have a sort of a narrative of their own place within current events, within contemporary issues, as the hero, or as this sort of good versus evil, or as this highly, I mean, depending on what you're talking about, I mean, there's whole journalists that have made their bones on taking personal issue stories, like the personal column, and like the Lindy West, turning it into this foil for the greater issue of the day. Do you think that's still the case, or is sort of, there's more like consensus going on, or do you still see like that new journalism influence is in the background? Like it seems the journalists, they themselves want to be this, like, like kind of like the activist or the philosopher or whatnot.
Well, one question that I think about occasionally is, why is there any outlet doing really well-reported features from a right of center perspective? It used to be what the Weekly Standard was very good at. The trouble is, doing that kind of journalism is very expensive, and it has a lot of risks. I think the heyday of the new journalism is partially a function of unlimited expense accounts, and because the pennies are being pinched now. There's just nobody out there that's going to give a writer a really long leash, the kind that they would give Hunter S. Thompson or Tom Wolfe, the space to go and do stories like that. And so that's problem number one. I mean, I just don't think the economics of it work. Problem number two is the fact that most of these journalists don't have anything to say, and their own personal point of view isn't very interesting.
Yeah. Other than their own megalomania, yeah.
Right. A guy you might mention would be like Ryan Lizza. He's a wonderful reporter, but like, would I want to read a big dollop of Ryan Lizza inserted into all of his stories? No, I'm afraid I don't think I would. There aren't any feature writers that I really want to be, that I want to hear from the subject. Hear from the author, have them injected into it. No, nobody's really doing that. But I guess the bigger problem is, and I ask myself this too, like, why there are still some regional papers that are around. I was reading a bunch of staff editorials from the Kansas City Star today. And why has the Kansas City Star not decided to zag when everybody else is zigging? Well, why did they not decide to be a sort of right of center regional paper? A institution that would be right for this would be USA Today. USA Today, instead of being like the right of center in the way that the Post is left of center, they want to be like the Washington Post at a lower reading level. And everybody wants to be the Washington Post at a lower reading level. And I'm not quite sure why.
Even the Washington Post themselves wants to be at a lower
right.
level.
Nobody's actually kind of changing their point of view. And you compare that to like the two Chicago papers during the run up to the Second World War. You've got Colonel McCormick's isolationist battleship, the Chicago Tribune, and then the Sun Times, which is like very Europhile, pro-British, really a pro-British intelligence operation. But you had these real, there was real conflict there, and each one of those papers had a very distinct sensibility, and that's something that I think we don't really have anymore. Yeah, I wish we did. I guess I wish we had more partisan newspapers.
I want to counter that by this one thing that was published by Andrew Sullivan on his Substack about a week ago, Emerging Cracks in the Woke Elite, where he talked about certain articles that were coming out from the New York Times and such. Let's see over here. He says, let's see. Blah, 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 blah. Everybody subscribe while I'm looking at this over here.
Andrew Sullivan, for years, he was like the token,
here, I found it. The New York, okay. So, similarly, I was quite shocked to read in The New Yorker a fair and empathic profile of an academic geneticist, Catherine Page Hardin, who acknowledges a role for genetics and social outcomes. So that is one example over here. There was another example, let's see, in that same profile, he says, the profile also puts the following woke heresy into the minds of the Upper West Side. Building a commitment to egalitarianism on our genetic uniformity is building a house on sand, and this genetic diversity is mankind's most precious resource, not a regrettable deviation from an ideal state of monotonous sameness. The New Yorker is also telling its readers that there are around 1,300 sites on the genome that are correlated with success in school. So anyway, that is one example from the New Yorker over here. He talked before about the Atlantic writing article recently as well, though talked about cancel culture. So I don't know. He talks about there being examples of the cracks in the woke elite, that these mainstream newspapers are all of a sudden starting to, step by step. I don't think we should expect them to all of a sudden write things, go from 1 to 5. But Arthur, do you see any hope in that?
Well, no, candidly, no. My sense is, so like the problem I'm talking about, where no regional newspaper is zagging where they could zag while everybody else is zigging, nobody's doing that. One of the ways that's been mentioned for solving that problem is like, what if you had some right-wing billionaire like Peter Thiel or something buy the LA Times? But think about, like, game that out in your mind, and you'll see it's a foolish idea. Eventually, I think if you tried to do that and steer it in a more right-wing direction, you would find that there's nothing worth owning there, because the newsroom's just been so rotted through. And, anybody who's there is already committed to kind of the left-wing point of view. You'd have to fire everybody. The name would be shit. You'd ruin the brand. It would basically be impossible to do. Yeah. And the thing that gives me even more trepidation about this is that I'm pretty pro-union in general, but the way that unionization has worked in the journalism industry is just incredibly cynical. There have been a lot of newsrooms that have unionized in the last couple of years. BuzzFeed was one. New York Magazine, I believe, unionized. A lot of these institutions have unionized, I believe, through CWA, and but the problem is, as a right winger, I would never that union would never protect me, and it's not meant to protect me. It's not for me. It would be more often used to make complaints against me and my harmful ideas in the workplace. That's
yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say when Current Affairs tried to union. I had to figure that out.
Well, this is kind of like Alexander Barr talking about how these industries that are shells of their former self, like Teen Vogue or something like that, how nobody cares about these industries anymore, and they're the ones that are getting the most leftist, the most woke. It's kind of
it's cargo cult unionism. The heyday of unionism, really, it was when industries were really taking off. They were incredibly productive, and workers wanted to get a slice of that pie. Totally noble. I favor that. But these are industries that are totally dying, and they're trying to get a little slice of Alden Global Capital's money, before the institution closes up shop when Facebook changes their algorithms. The other piece of this, we could probably go on for half an hour about this, is just so I worked at the Daily Caller, which is largely an advertising funded publication, which is it's one of the few that's that heavily reliant on advertising. It's just all free. That's not quite true. I was actually the editor for the first paywall, but it is still mostly free. And when you have a business model like that, and everybody's reliant on the same business model to a more or less degree, you're basically 100% beholden to the algorithms of the big social media companies. I remember a couple of years ago, you guys might have heard of this, the pivot to video, the vaunted pivot to video. All of these publications were going to bet really hard on big video departments. They were going to put out all of these, sexy, well-produced videos. Vox did this, BuzzFeed did this. IJR, which is a right of center publication, did this, and then Facebook changed their video algorithms, and most of them disappeared. Now this is another one. Those guys all just got totally screwed for a totally arbitrary decision on the part of the platforms, and IJR didn't survive it. They are a shadow of their former selves. Mike closed up. So it's not there. There can be no stability in this industry under those conditions. There needs to be a sort of either one of the proposals that's going around. And we on my old podcast, we had the guy who's lobbying for this on the show. They want to basically have the publishers have collective bargaining rights. They want to be allowed to cartelize in order to negotiate with the platforms, which is one way of making it work. I'm not sure that there aren't better ways, but that's one way of doing it. Yeah.
What do you think is the bare essence? And I want to get Trustworthy, Slav, and Average Centrist views on this as well. In fact, we could start with Slav, then go to Average, and then go to yourself, Arthur. What would you say is the average thing that's not average? What do you think is the basis thing that is needed for decent journalism, where, yes, you still need people to go out into the field, to go travel countries, but you don't need a newsroom anymore, do you? You don't need all those people pretending to work behind the anchor or whatever it is that they're doing there. I mean, maybe they're working for real.
Yeah, like
I don't know.
Movies, like that one Russell Crowe film. It's like the hour that I published this story that's going to bring down... Like even the regional... Like, Arthur, you had a great point about the regional stories. I remember... reading the book Dark Alliance by Gary Webb, and that was published by the Iran Contra stuff, San Jose Mercury, was it called? Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Because at the time it seemed like little papers, even like Lev, even in your parts, like the Village Voice used to be, I know it's like the totally like progressive, like hippy dippy.
Oh man, I met this guy at a bar who worked for the Village Voice. My God, that was not a great conversation.
It wasn't a good conversation?
It was not a good conversation.
Well, they used to publish some subversive shit from these, like, counterculture writers, like Grove Press. Like, it used to be actual... Like, even Playboy, ironically enough, had good articles. I mean, it was a joke, but they had brilliant authors.
I unironically read, like, the 1950s Playboys for the articles.
Yeah, the 1970s.
As well as the beautiful
great.
Playmates. Joyce Nazari. Liv Lindland from 1970s.
Oh,
go
now
to
you're
our
gonna
go
go
to
on.
our Discord server and just
No.
scroll up. You'll thank me later. I'm posting the Discord server.
Alright,
Scroll up.
Trustworthy Slav. Oh my god.
Go for it, Slav. What would you say is the minimum we need to have good journalism in this country? With still having people on the ground and stuff. But what would be your ideal journalism?
How was the way you worded it originally? Was the bassist?
I wanted to say like basic, like the bassist. I
thought you meant like
it.
I thought you meant like as in like based, and I was like, I feel talked down to.
Double entendre. It's like diffidence, right? He gets the minor spelling.
I mean, I don't know. Okay, I mean, like acknowledging right out of the gate that like journalism, I mean, I think I just generally have like a general distaste for it, but it's a dirty job that somebody's got to do. It's so nice that Arthur got up and walked away before he had to hear me say that.
You're muted.
More visible.
There you go.
Well, perfect. I don't know. Defund universities. I mean, I don't know what to say. That's probably going to be the best. That's kind of an ideal. Go ahead.
But like, what about how, it's not so much a lack of information. Well, it is a lack of information because most people, it seems their capacity to retain information is going down, but rather it's the deluge of opinion and sort of like journalism and hyperreality doesn't make sense anymore in a lot of ways. So I wonder, like, what would your take and what Average Centrist and Arthur's take on that? Like, is it that we're just the flood of what the average people is seeing and hearing and looking at is so great that we really can't, we're talking about like, just the contempt I think a lot of them have. Like, speaking of the Mr. Hands paste, who's that guy that people think he's a glowy, Ken Klippen something?
Yeah, Ken Klippenstein. He is a glowy.
He is a glowy, right? He said like, well, if you don't like it, then how about like, just move to another state or get another job. It's like, that's kind of not really the point of why people are mistrustful of certain authorities. It's just like this very, I don't know, some of these, I understand why journalism is like lower on the totem pole nowadays than lawyers and serial rapists. Yeah. Oh shit! I should have said it.
And lawyers are scum as well. Like.
I mean, I don't know. Like, I guess like
politicians.
Getting more like, I'm seeing different ways of interpreting this question, right? And it's like, okay, like, do we want to talk about like the media landscape, right? Well, like, I don't really know. Like, that's
no.
Like
here's how I could see it. Like, we could have people.
Lev doesn't want me to talk today.
I don't want you to. No, I would love for you to talk, but just to contextualize it a bit, I want to try to imagine what we can do with having more independent media that becomes more trustworthy, as opposed to people being dependent on the Borg. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of what I'm getting to here. Like, how can we make people look at online creators? They probably already are to a certain extent, but have much more trustworthiness there and much more credibility in that sphere as well.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Okay. Well, then, like, I guess just practically, I would just say just accelerate the process that's going on right now and just let like the media just completely invalidate themselves more and more and more. I mean, like, good people doing good shit, that cream rising to the top, that's always going to be fucking happening. There's always going to be some independent person who's doing good shit. Like, there's always going to be like a Lev and a Geo making arts, right? There's always going to be somebody doing, solid reporting. I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm contradicting myself a little.
But are too many people stuck within the system to such an extent? Maybe we're the ones in a bubble thinking that the people are getting free from the matrix. Meanwhile, most people couldn't give a crap.
Because I had an interesting experience just yesterday, which was, and I've actually had this a couple of times now, which is, I live in the Pacific Northwest. I'm in the belly of the beast, right? And I've been really encouraged by a couple conversations I've had with normies I know to just realize really like how how little genuine belief normie libs have in the official narrative that's going on right now. And like, they're the beneficiaries of this. Like, I mean, nobody is, we're all getting fucked, right? But I mean, like, they're, you know, in the game, they're winning.
Can you give me an example of a conversation?
Just specifically talking about COVID stuff. Okay,
well then don't give me an example of conversation. No, I'm kidding. I mean, you could just say it in certain ways that, you know, minimize. See, Arthur, this is how much we have to strive to make sure that our channel doesn't get taken down.
Right.
This is what we're dealing with here.
Yeah, I err on the side of less, right? No, but I mean, in this case, I think that just being vague is fine, because it's all one fucking thing, and it's all. I mean, do you basically believe that this is all horse shit and that you just can't believe the mainstream just view and explanation of the world and just most of everything you're told? Yes or no? And I'm more and more impressed and encouraged by how many normies I encounter just don't really put a lot of stake into that. And so, yeah, like if you're asking like, what is the way forward and everything, it's like, well, fuck, like I think that our elites are doing a pretty fucking good job of invalidating themselves as it is. And then outside of that, I mean, like, what does an actual ideal look like? Like, I don't think that this is just limited to journalism. I think that like a huge problem is just that we just don't really cultivate a very high quality elite to begin with.
Absolutely.
And I think that is a huge part of that. And, you know, I'm saying that begrudgingly, obviously, you know, because everyone likes the idea of, you know, that not being the salute, just a better elite, right?
Well, it's kind of like what you were referring to earlier when you were talking about having to be careful not going into the direction of the little guy is always right, where, as you may already know, like, I believe in a hierarchy. I believe we're always going to have some kind of hierarchy. My whole point, though, is I really think the hierarchy right now is not doing a very competent job at being in the position that it is.
Well, the hierarchy right now rewards behaviors and values that are like anti-fucking social and anti-human. And like, if you can just, I mean, I don't know, like as vague as I can get, just like changing the incentive system. But like, I feel like you need like shotgun brain surgery to be able to get to that point. Like mountains need to fucking move. But yeah, I mean, I think the best thing, the best thing for somebody working in independent media right now is to just let the clown show in the mainstream continue. Because like there's what the fuck am I gonna do? What the fuck am I gonna do as an individual to like really like stick it to people at the Boston Globe or the New York Times or things like that? I can point to the fact that like I don't think that, you know, monopolization, Sinclair Broadcasting, all these things, I don't like those things, right? But like, what the fuck am I going to do? I'm going to let them just bleed themselves out because they seem to be doing a good job.
I think we have more power than we realize. For example, over here's a picture of me with Julia Gardner, who I know for several years. Wonderful girl. And here is a picture of Julia Gardner with what's her name? I don't remember her name, but you know who I'm talking about. That lady, the stepdaughter of Kamala Harris. Yeah, Ernhoff.
Ella Emhoff.
Yes,
Little
Ella
Bushwick.
Yeah,
Little Bushwick.
They're in the gala here. So the reason why I'm saying this is because
I saw memes about this
she's
picture.
An art school grad, right? She went to Pratt or something.
I think so, yeah. But
did.
the reason why I'm mentioning this is that I think that this is a very small world when it comes to the kind of area in New York that I grew up with, that I grew up in, the kind of people that I grew up with. And I think there are going to be people like myself who are in such positions where they could actually speak to people who are within certain circles. I don't think it's done that often. I don't think it's ever done.
So you're saying, Lev, that you're going to be our counter elite?
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Sure, go, boy. Sure, I'm going to need some concessions.
Hashtag invest in Lev. Hashtag invest in Lev. That's how this works. No, but it is true, though, because I really think that a lot of people, like you were saying, Slav, in the bottom of their heart, I think they're already sensing something's wrong. They need a bit more of a push, I think, just to see things through a little bit better. And it's already happening right now with, I know, Arthur, you were talking before about how you don't see this as being that big of a deal. I would say give it time. When it comes to the article that came out in the New Yorker, like Sullivan was talking about, and in the Atlantic. So
give me some context here. What's not a big deal?
Sure. So the article that came out in The Atlantic was one where they were bemoaning the woke politics of today and the harsh punishments that are leveled at people who divert away from the mainstream consensus, or for people who get canceled. And then there was another article that was talking about genetics and the outcome of, human behavior, which is a very taboo topic, as we all know. But that was something that was published in... I think there was in New Yorker magazine.
What is your take on that woke article? What's your take on that?
Well, as far as my take on it, I think it's too early to tell where exactly this is going to go. There's an organization that I'm pretty close with, FAIR, the Foundation Against Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism, and we recently had one of our great BTR guests, Daniel Itfrenze. I'm not saying his last name correctly, but he was on our show multiple times. He's definitely going to be on again. But he was recently featured in a column by Barry Weiss, and I'm going to link it right over here. And no, Gio, you can moan and groan all day for all I care.
I'm telling you,
but
these people aren't your friends. They're not gonna.
Here's the thing. So Daniel is my friend.
Barry Weiss to the world aren't gonna defend you.
I'm not talking about
Gio.
I'm not talking
Barry Weiss to the world gonna put me in a fucking camp.
They would put you in the camp.
I'm not talking about Barry Weiss here. No,
Swear
one
to
second.
God.
I'm not talking about Barry Weiss. What I'm talking about is the general tendency of these more kind of like on the fence elites to start changing the narrative from what it was before. My question to everybody here is, do you think that this is something that's going to accelerate into what? Or do you think that this is just a temporary setback and Cthulhu is still going to keep swimming left, as Moldbug says?
Yeah. Okay, so when we're talking about some fucking article that some bird brain at the New Yorker wrote, I'm sorry if this is anyone here knows or anything, but when we're talking about like some person at a publication being like, all right, this is my line in the sand against wokeness.
We went too far, guys.
No, exactly. It's hard to overstate how little of a threat that is. That is a defense mechanism for this system of belief. Like inter-elite like outcries against progressivism is how they beat critics basically to the punch. They absorb counter narratives and it strengthens itself. So not only is that not at all a sign of great things to come, it's literally the exact opposite. And that kind of change won't be indicated on the inside, right? Like it will be Go ahead.
I'll give you a counter to that, I only have one counter. It's that parents who I know who are part of this organization, they've already started taking steps to change the way that the school board functions. They're voting with their wallet when it comes to what exactly their kids are being exposed to, where they don't like a lot of this woke nonsense that they're teaching their own kids. And these are, again, the elites. These are the people who are going to be the top of the hierarchy, several years to come from now. So what you may say may be true to a certain extent. I'm looking at this just like the motivation that the parents have for doing what they're doing, and I wouldn't say it's the motivation that you're attributing to them, at least.
I want to say one final thing before I let someone else. I'm talking so much here.
You're on fire.
It is the counterbalance to that, and it's a matter of which one is a bigger factor here, right? The distaste that these individual parents have against this, which they're completely justified in because it's abhorrent and it's fucking child abuse, right? Does that counterbalance the fact that there is humongous incentive to buy into these social technologies, this style of talking and behaving and of thinking and of interacting with people is a way of climbing up, right? And that's a hell of an incentive. And is that incentive outweighed by parents' distaste and concern for their children? I really don't think so, because I think that the parents also want their kids to fucking climb, dude. I mean, one of the best things you can do for your career is to just become fluent in this shit. And I'm sure that a huge number of these people don't even believe the shit they're saying. But like, you know, you get fluent in telling your fat friend that they're valid and talking about bodies and spaces, and it's deranged shit.
That was a relevant point, Slav, for what was happening this week.
Well, and then in addition to that, there's the fact that most journalism is patronage based, and that shift is what?
Oh no, I'm agreeing with you in a idiotic way.
It's patronage based, and it's been that way for a long time, and it's been moving in that direction. The big notable shift was the Tampa Bay Times. The Tampa Bay Times used to be like a mid-market, pretty big newspaper, successful here down in Florida, where I am right now. They went nonprofit, and they've been pretty successful turning into a nonprofit. They've gone from being a normal company to being a nonprofit, which means they're patronage based. And this is kind of that shift is happening. That's sort of in the middle market of the industry. At the top of the market, you've got Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos isn't making any money on the Washington Post. He's losing a lot of money. And then down to the bottom, you've got all these small nonprofits where a lot of the journalism gets done these days. And so the thing about patronage is it's usually risk averse. I think we can be blinded a little bit by like the art market of the 20th century, where people are always in search of like avant-garde stuff. The vast majority of patronage is actually pretty risk averse. And it certainly is in journalism. It's hard to build up an institution. Obviously, the best way to fix all of this is for somebody to give me a pile of money, but I don't know anybody yet.
We're being paid by Peter Thiel as we speak right now.
Oh, good. Okay,
but another thing that the parents, another thing that those parents are doing, by the way, is they are bringing in people like Daryl Davis, like Peter Boghossian. I know, Gio, you're not a big fan of Peter Boghossian, but regardless, they are doing certain things like hiring lawyers to help out teachers that have been fired from their school for opposing critical race theory. So they may be doing a specific thing with their kids, but they're also doing something with the community at large. So my hope is that they are going to change the kind of patronage that goes on, where, again, to Alexander Bart's point and what I was bringing up before, the industries that seem to be the wokest today are the ones that also seem to be the dinosaurs. They're the ones that seem to be, so when we're in that situation, I doubt there's going to be a fucking Met Gala 20 years from now. Maybe it'll be there, but it'll take a whole different form than the one that it takes today. I think a lot of these things may be on their way out, and my hope is that there's going to be a refreshing of the elite. There's going to be different people who will step in there.
By refreshing, we mean watering the tree with their blood in Minecraft, of course. That's
oh god, yeah.
Minecraft.
But again, no, I don't want anybody to get hurt at all. I am a very anti-violence person. My whole point here, though, is that new generations are going to grow up. While they're growing up, the people who are here right now, there's going to come a certain point where people who accommodate themselves to more and more extreme ways of acting inside of the culture, I think that the people who are going to be the most accommodating are going to be just like the people who were accommodating to Joseph Stalin. They're either going to be squashed out and canceled if they're too smart, if they figure out that this is not really working, or they're going to be clever and manipulative to a certain extent, but at a certain point, I think the only people who are going to be left are going to be the idiots, are going to be the ass kissers. And when you have a society that is built on that kind of foundation, I don't think that part of society is going to last for a long time. I think that naturally something else is going to assume the leadership position that the idiots, the weak-willed idiots that are occupying 20 years from now, the industries that we're looking at today getting woke. Like, I think that they're just going to dwindle and melt away from sheer incompetence, and something else going to take its place. But I don't know, Arthur, am I being too optimistic here?
Yes, you're being too optimistic.
100%, 100%.
I think things get worse before they get better. And,
oh no, I'm not saying they're gonna get better instantly. Of course, I agree they're gonna get worse first, sure. But I'm saying after they get worse.
And I think one detail that's worth maybe discussing a little bit is when you look at some of these outrages that have been roiling newsrooms, from the New York Times, they're having it at the Wall Street Journal as well, where and the wokeness is coming largely from the newsrooms. You'd think, maybe the really bad woke stuff is coming from the opinion section because the opinion, they're allowed to have their opinion there. But it's actually the opposite. It's the newsrooms that have been pushing everybody else. Because if you remember that Tom Cotton op-ed in the New York Times.
Oh, yeah.
That was the editorial page. Because, I mean, if you run an editorial page, and I ran an opinion section, I know what it's like. It's your job to run people from across the spectrum. And their job is getting harder and harder as the newsroom will tolerate less and less. And so I think we're probably going to see some pretty, sparks fly because of that. And then also, I mean, at the big and institutional players, I think this is sort of what you're talking about. The ones that have a hard time, they come across as a little bit staid and stuffy. It's because of their DEI departments. That's where this is all coming from. And I don't think people quite realize the degree to which DEI has infiltrated sort of the editorial processes of newsrooms. At a fairly prominent newspaper company, it's one of the biggest in the country, they have a diversity committee that's given free rein on the content management system of the publication. They can just go in and flag stories that they don't like or that piss them off, and then those people get a talking to. We've not really had a conversation about what that means for editorial process. It's really it's a major change because some guy on the diversity committee is given veto power over articles that get run. We haven't had a national conversation about that, and it shapes news coverage in a very important way. I mean, it makes reporters and editors reluctant to cover certain things. It's big. It's a major change.
What is DEI for the people who don't know what that is?
Oh, diversity, equity, and inclusion. The diversity bureaucrats, basically.
Yeah.
And the big companies all have DEI departments, and the amount the amount of power they're given over actual content varies, but in some cases it's actually quite a lot.
I mean, it's pretty amazing if you just think about like how would most people react if they basically understood that there was a in every news office a priest who got the final say of what does and does not get published.
Right. That's exactly right. That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
But then to the point that you were talking about earlier, where it gets worse before it gets better, once again, I agree with the getting worse part, but how do you see the getting worse part playing out? And would you give any credence to the idea that we would eventually be able to get out of that and for there to be like a competition to the elite that we have today that wouldn't subscribe to it anymore?
Yeah, I mean, this is the big question. Like I said, the reason why I want to see some regional papers zag where others are zigging is because I think it would be very successful. There are major markets that aren't being served by like a competent newsroom. And I've got many criticisms of the conservative media. A lot of the stuff that gets published is not so good. If there were a credible regional paper that just decided to be center right, I think they would be pretty successful. But for some reason that hasn't happened. And that's one of the things that makes me like pretty trepidatious about all of this is if it's not happening, then the rot is already too deep.
Yeah.
Well, you keep mentioning
if that's the case, I guess to finish answering your question, I mean, those newsrooms just keep failing. They continue to find it hard to hold subscribers, that sort of thing. They'll just continue to fade away. They will. What I'm talking about in terms of a shift in strategy, I think that's the way to save some of these guys. But if they don't want to be saved, then they'll continue to fail.
But when you talk about it, you're also mentioning a lot of times newsrooms and papers, and in a way, it almost reminds me of the email icon being an envelope, where I wonder if a lot of these are even going to be, I mean, I don't think they're that relevant today as they may have been, and I realize it may be a bit insensitive since you were within journalism, and there may be a part of you that kind of, remembers the good old days where, I don't know. But the point is that, yeah, well, the point that I'm getting to here, Arthur, is that with the internet, with anybody like here on BTR just being able to talk, I don't want it to be unprofessional. I want everything to be thoroughly researched. But I'm just saying that there may be more creative ways of getting information out, thanks to, kind of like what we're doing right now. And would you have like any ideas of how we can integrate, let's say, the professionalism that would come from more of an old school journalism background, which is kind of lacking today in mainstream journalism anyway, but is there any way to merge that with the online content creation?
Well, I can tell you what I'd do if somebody gave me that big pile of money. I think what's desperately needed right now is sort of a right-leaning ProPublica, because there are a lot of these kind of big public interest stories that are just not getting told. There are a lot of $20 bills that are on the ground. Building up a competent newsroom that could tell those stories, I think would be quite successful. Like a sort of right-leaning ProPublica would do very well. I'm skeptical. So like a lot of what's interesting about new media is what they do with video. But I couldn't in good conscience invest in video right now, just because there's no, you can get screwed over by YouTube so easily. There's not a credible alternative. So I mean, it would be hard for me to say that, you should get super creative with the content. I mean, I would say just tell the stories, like do written journalism, because everything else that's very expensive, you can have the rug pulled out from under you very, very quickly.
Plus, podcasting's destroying them. I mean, that
too.
I mean,
but I wouldn't see them as enemies, though. Like, I would see podcasts should actually start teaming up with more of these local, former newspaper people, so that maybe there could be some kind of synergistic element there. I don't know.
That sounds like poison to me. But
oh no! Why do you say that, Average Centrist? I want to know.
Well, I'm gonna. I don't hope you don't mind, but I want to make like a bit more of a general point about this whole thing. I'm gonna, and Gio, you'll probably like this because I'm going to speak in biblical terms here. But I see the journalistic class and the activist class as essentially the Pharisees and the Sadducees of the whole situation. Like, the whole thing with Jesus when he was coming out, whether you believe in him or not, it doesn't really matter. The whole symbolism of the whole situation was that when he came out against them, was that he was pointing out their hypocrisies, because they would go out into the world basically virtue signaling. When Jesus was talking about, don't do your prayers in public and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The whole point of it is to say, like, don't, like, be genuine. Basically, this whole shit is essentially just a facade. And all this journalistic class stuff that I'm seeing, like all this manipulation of people and stuff like that for their own agendas and stuff, it's essentially the same kind of thing. We're just seeing it repeating over and over again. It's not changed ever since then. Whether Jesus is real or not, what's been codified in the Gospels is literally just what is going on and on and on and on. Right. And if we're not gonna acknowledge that, then it's just gonna keep happening. Like to me, like, trying to have some kind of faith. The reason why I say they're poison is because trying to have some kind of faith in these people. I don't mean to have this as a slight against you, Arthur, by the way. Like, I understand there are journalists out there who do have integrity, but I'm just trying to say that, like, in general sense, in a cultural sense, they act as arbiters to the truth and what is real, and they kind of wank themselves off. They get off on trying to manipulate the world to what they want it to be, and they have a god complex about it. And to me, they're like the middleman between the elite. Like, they are the middleman that, how do you put it in words? Like, they just fuck with everybody. They just fuck with everything and make everything worse. I've never seen any. It's hard for me to point out a lot of journalism that's done any real good in recent years. I'm not saying there's never been any journalism that's done good. There obviously has been, that's uncovered particular things. But in recent years, especially in the political sphere, a lot of the time, it's just a lot of smoke and mirrors and bullshit just to aggrandize themselves. And I don't know. I just think it's a waste of time to try and
like a useless middleman. It's like a manager.
Yeah, in a way. Yeah. It's like an agent or something, you know, like they're just...
And the Godword podcast says, yes, they act as priests. That's why raw, unedited, unprofessional podcasts were and are an interesting threat. I mean, when you have somebody going back to, again, like Styx Hexenhammer 666, who we are going to have on with Joel Davis coming up in a couple of weeks, but when you have somebody like him, my idea here, Arthur and Average Centrist and Geo and Trustworthy Slav, is that you can have somebody like Styx, maybe not Styx exactly, because Styx is an unusual cat. He's able to store a lot of information in his head, but let's say somebody less competent than Styx, but still interesting. You get somebody like that, and you give that guy or gal, whatever, I'm not going to discriminate, you give them a whole group of people that would go out, do research on the field, do research at home, you know, send them certain things, have them go through them, analyze them, and have a kind of structure where there is an independent voice who people can trust for, you know, their views, while at the same time having a kind of support system around them to just make a lot of, you know, make a lot of good content and be able to reach out to places that a single person wouldn't.
Lev, and it's trash. That's what fucking Ethan Klein does. It's terrible.
Yeah,
they have a whole team.
I'm kind of gonna just throw out the entire premise here because it feels like here comes Slav flipping the fucking table. Like,
go for it.
It kind of sounds like you're describing like how can, unless I'm just horribly misinterpreting, it's a little bit like how can we civilize independent media? How can we get podcasts and independent reporting, whatever, up a little bit more to the standards of institutional action, right? And
without them being affected by said institutions as much as possible.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that probably the biggest factor here is just media environment. I think the real answer is that everything, and we already see this, everything is going to start looking less like nightly news and more like Instagram stories. And that we're going to, and that what's actually going to happen is that we're going to move away from rationalism, and that it's going to. I mean, I think you talk to the average millennial, and if you actually get like a really candid moment, most of, like, if you talk to your average like normie libtard, they're going to fucking say that, like, you know, growing up they got most of their news from like Jon Stewart or something, right? Yeah. And like, I think that's telling, and I don't think that it's the right question to be like, well, how are we going to correct this course? How are we going to correct this? It almost kind of seems a little bit like trad, right? Of being like, how are we going to get back to 1950 so that we can just get back to where we are now?
How are we going to get back to 1990, Slav?
Yeah, right. No. What's going to happen is that it's ultimately going to be a move away from rationalism. It's going to be less reporting and standards, and it's going to be more infotainment. And I don't even necessarily think that needs to be looked at as a bad thing, to be perfectly honest with you.
J. Arthur, what do you? Oh, did I cut you off, Slav?
No, I think that was a good time to cut.
I agree with you. This is why that one tweet I quoted in my piece in Ending Bigly, I forget by who. It was a picture of Alex Jones. It said, the age of the expert, the managerial bug man is over. The age of the shaman, the oracle, is now. And
that's literally
Alex Jones.
That's literally it. Like, you have the ability to put it into poetic terms that I don't have. That's it.
That was a great tweet. But what do you think of that analysis? And I want to ask you about the future of journalism as someone who is in the industry. And also... a spicy question would be Tucker Carlson. Sorry, Moldvin on Tucker Carlson.
Moldbug.
I call him Moldvin because it's like the new and the old Curtis
I
Yarvin.
get it. I
You
get it.
And wait,
Yeah.
and wait till I show you the album cover. Hold on, I'm gonna post this in BTR chat right now. This is not gonna be posted for about a week, but for all you lucky listeners here, I wanted to share it with you right now. This is for one of the shorts, but this is the cover that I did over here.
Oh
So,
God.
we
That's
have
when
a-
they were That's when they were
Jesus
knife fighting
Christ.
over Moldbug, and Carlsbad was just like,
You put
Yeah.
an eyeball on orange.
This guy just looks like a horror writer, you know what I mean?
It's horrifying.
That one will be fun. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds great. I want to hear
All right,
Arthur's.
novels
I want to hear
about vampires
Arthur's
and shit.
take though.
Well, I do think even in terms of Moldbug is an old friend, and Tucker's my former boss. So obviously, I'm very happy to see the two of them getting together. I think it's
oh
wonderful.
yeah, that's. I didn't know you were friends with Moldbug.
Yeah, we go sort of way back. I've known him for a while. I was involved in the whole neo-reactionary blogging scene.
That's
and-
right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Actually, Arthur, just to clear this up, this
Can you get
is a
him on
thumbnail.
BTR?
Well, hold on. This is a thumbnail for a short from one of our streams, so this isn't actually scheduled. But now that you broke the ice by saying that, hell yes, why not? Actually, I would love to have you and Curtis Yarvin on the stream. Let me know, if we can.
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
I'd be down. If you can get in a word edgewise. I mean, Moldbug is really a prodigious talker.
Yeah.
If
I would
anybody
love
can
to-
do that, it is Lev.
I would love to show him that.
They share
cover as
something
well.
in common that lets the. Never mind. Not
Oh,
gonna-
Lord.
Don't
Gio.
say the word.
All right,
Don't
anyway.
Shade, the shade.
The kvetching.
All right, so
I can't.
Arthur. Gio's question.
Future of journalism, and then
future of
Moldbug. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of it getting more like Instagram, I mean, I think that's probably right. If you look at the new successful media properties, the big one in DC is Axios, and their whole style of presenting stories is basically bullet points. And the future of journalism is almost the opposite of the new journalism kind of stuff you were talking about, Gio. It's creating talking points for actually I'll tell you a little bit about from my experience what gets people to subscribe. So I was the first editor for the Daily Caller's paywall program, and there were basically three things that we could rely on to get conversions. One was big name interviews. The other was telling angles of stories that were kind of being undercovered that the readers are going to care about. Take a big story like Russiagate, find some little tidbit that's worth delving into more detail on and telling it more fully. But the third thing that really drives conversions is giving you talking points for when you're arguing with your lib friends. That really does convert people to subscribers. And I think they're not thinking about it in this way, but that's exactly what Axios is about. They're pitching it to a particular kind of upper middle class, professional type DC person, and giving them their bullet points for when they go into work in the morning. And that's probably that's your future right there.
Yeah.
There's I think part of the this is something this podcast probably cares a lot about is the artfulness of journalism kind of goes by the wayside when you turn it into an ESPN kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
When it's just a matter of ESPN and getting bullet points to talk, there's not really a whole lot of room for any artfulness. And I think that's rather sad, actually. But no, so that's my vision of the future.
I think even the blog sphere, even with NRX, I mean, there was various reasons why it imploded, obviously. I came in at the end, I was more of with Frog Twitter. I published with Adam Wallace and Thermidor Magazine, blah, blah, blah. So I think
so you know P.T. Carlo.
Well, I did know. Yeah, anyways.
I'm the one in the hot seat.
You're getting me in trouble here.
Hot seat?
Yeah,
all these inside baseball things. I'm just sitting back here. I wish I had some popcorn.
Nathan Duffy was in the chat, so I mean,
Yeah, he's
Anyways, moving
guaranteed.
on. So
I do want to get, by the way, Average Centrist, since your name is Average Centrist, I wonder if you could live up to your name. Would you have any criticism that you could level at, let's say, more of the right-leaning
wait, I wanted to
media
finish my point though.
apparatus? Okay, so Gio, finish your point.
My
then.
point was that it seemed like a lot of them, like, okay, a lot of them, they have like their one basic point, like fucking Lindy man, you know. But what I noticed is that when it came to, if you can arm the conservatives with like talking points to own the libtards, it's like, for example, like the thing that came to my mind was anonymous conservative. Like everyone knows who he is because everyone, for a time anyways, was talking about like, yeah, overscale selection and that's how it's gonna work, right? Like, I think if you can give some kind of like snappy, like even listicle of like, okay, here's how you own the libs, then it's like, that makes sense to me. I think even like that's how Breitbart I think got big during the Gamergate days, because it was like, you know, or when Trump got elected, like every single day on Breitbart, it was like the biggest, like the comments were like thousands of comments deep. It was like, that was the heyday, right? Like that, you know, and you really got to give it to Steve Bannon for doing that. Like, you know, until like the New York Times, I was in class actually. I was in grad school at the time, and my friend texted me saying, I never thought I'd ever hear the name of, you know, Julius Evola on the New York Times. And I'm like, damn. Then I learned it was because Steve Bannon Anyways, what were you going to say, Lev?
So my comment was to Average Centrist. I think you may have had some time to steep in my question to you of what would you level as far as criticism of the more right-leaning media? Like, because look, we were, I think, giving Cathy, I think it was very fair, like a lot of the points that we were bringing up, but I never wanted to be a one-sided thing. I mean, I consider myself to be a classical liberal. People already know that here. And when it comes to balancing out these things, I think it's very important for people who are within the right to take a look and see what could be certain bubbles that they're in as well.
I honestly think they're kind of one in the same. Like they're just two sides of the same coin. Like they're trying to still uphold the same kind of situation. Like, you know, if for instance in this country there's like a big thing with the left-wing media where they're like against you know, they're all like, oh, Islamophobia, blah blah blah, but then there's like a right-wing media that are like really savage against Muslims and stuff like that. But in my mind, they're just basically doing the same thing where they're fear-mongering each other. They're basically just upholding like a situation where there's no chance for compromise, there's no chance for people to come together and have nuance between different things. I think the right-wing media is essentially just a mirror image of the other side. And I think like the left-wing media, maybe I don't know, maybe I'm just having rose-tinted glasses here, but I feel like in the past, they were a little bit more they had a bit more integrity. There was a bit more to them. But like over time, like especially in the last 10 years or so, like they have literally just become Fox News. Like they're all the same to me. Like they're just all the same. Like when I'm talking about media and journalists, I'm not just talking about the left-wing media. I'm talking about all of them. Like
conservatism TM is like, yeah.
Well, are we just talking? Well, hold on. Are we talking just conservatism TM? Because Average Centrist, it doesn't sound to me like you're just talking about Turning Point USA and stuff like that.
I mean, I don't know exactly what you're actually gravitating towards it.
Well,
like, I don't know.
I could explain a little bit better. So what I'm gravitating towards too is that we do have like more mainstream milquetoast conservative outlets, but then we have conservative outlets that, let's say, would be more reactionary based. Like Arthur, like you have a reactionary in your Twitter profile. So what I'm trying to figure out here is, what would you say Average Centrist would be the kind of bubble that Arthur may potentially be in as well? Like, not to put you on the spot, but since we did this to
it's cool. I don't know Arthur's work that well, in all honesty. So
Arthur, how would you describe your work, just to contextualize this a bit more, because I don't want to speak out of turn here.
I guess I'd just say I'm a conservative journalist. The most of the stories that in the last couple of months, I hewed to what I had two goals when I was the editor of the website at TAC. Number one was to increase the quality of our reporting, and number two was to get more normie conservatives reading us. And the way to get normie conservatives reading us is by breaking stories. It's not by running the talking points. And so I hewed, and the ability of the conservative movement to expend resources in unproductive and stupid ways is pretty much limitless. They are, it's the most wasteful racket in the country by a large margin. And my sense is, you can kind of see this today in the attacks on JD Vance. JD Vance is about as Trumpy of a candidate as you could possibly hope for. And I mean that in a positive way. He's become very much a Trumpist after Trump. And yet there are these attacks from the conservative side against him for being a never Trumper. And they're very bad faith. And I think the ability of the conservative movement to kind of blackball people with attacks like that, I think it's very effective. And I wanted to make sure that we didn't get drawn into that when I was editing TAC. And so we ran a piece that was sort of the case for why you're not crazy if you think the election might have been stolen. We ran that. I think it's the only tough piece about Dominion voting systems that didn't provoke a lawsuit. So I'm pretty proud of that one.
And for the YouTube, it was the election in Nicaragua that was stolen.
Yes.
So
yes, exactly.
Sorry.
And I ran something on defending Matt Gaetz, and now it looks like he's been vindicated in a pretty big way. So I took a bunch of these risks, but it was partly because I was worried that these dishonest attacks would come for us at TAC, and that I think we were sort of successful at heading that off. But it's a constant concern because the conservative media is infuriating in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Well, what happened with Matt Gaetz? Is he this R-wordist, a young cheese pizzaist? Was just blown out of what happened there? Well, do you have a pizza-related thing, or I don't know?
What we got pepperoni on that bitch.
What he was accused of? He was accused of two things. He was accused of sharing revenge porn on the floor of Congress.
Okay.
And he was accused of sleeping with an underage prostitute.
Right.
And both of those claims turn out not to be true.
Really?
Yeah. The girl who was the prostitute was actually of age. She was 18.
Oh, but she was a prostitute though. That's we got that right.
18 is kind of scummy, but that I get. It's not like. It's not like that.
I'm just up to that Sopranos episode where how does he say hua? You know who I'm talking about, Gio, right?
Ralphie.
Ralphie, yeah.
No, but because the reporting of it, like all the resistards on Twitter, they legitimately bomb every single one of his tweets with like, "You are not the real word, not cheese pizza." You know what I mean? Like they persist in there. Yeah.
Is that a YouTube thing? Can I not say that?
It's in the middle of the stream, so it's all right. Probably, don't worry.
Okay.
About it. Yeah, just don't risk it again. But
I just don't want to say he's part of the cabal of pedophiles that rule the country.
There it is.
He wasn't. He was in collecting various works of art with John Podesta. Me and my friend on my own YouTube channel, Giant Productions at youtube.com. We have a podcast series called Style Talks, which is mostly around art and aesthetics. And we actually wanted to do an episode, we might still do it, on all of like the Podesta and the Clinton art collection. So we wanted to like review.
That'd be great. I'd watch that.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, I'd be well into that.
He's coming back in October. He takes his internet breaks where he like disconnects his hard drive for 2 months. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, about like the Gates situation is like, it's one of those things where it's kind of like the Russiagate shit, where if you say to people that no, Matt Gaetz was actually not proven in a court of law to be a revenge porn leaker and a cheese pizzas, they're like, oh, no, it's like the Kavanaugh thing. It's like, can you really prove a negative? You know what I mean? Like because they create an aura of the hermeneutics of suspicion is always placed upon these figures, right?
Well, I can say that I feel vindicated on this one because one of the guys that Gates accused of trying to extort him in all of this has now been arrested.
Oh, there you go.
So I mean, I think there's the story right there. And of course, that didn't get nearly the play as the initial allegation.
Yeah,
Of course, yeah.
of course. Also, I have to ask this: is your friend say his fucking name, Curtis Yarvin? Is your friend Curtis Yarvin being paid off by Peter Thiel? Is he being given Thiel bucks?
You know, I know him, but we're not that close. I probably wouldn't be privy to that information. But you know, I've only gotten 4 or 5 envelopes of cash from the Thiel people. I haven't really been brought in.
Okay.
I have to go through the 3rd tier of initiation, where they blindfold me. Then they take me into the room and they hit me over the head with an inflatable hammer. And
give you a paddle in, like.
Yeah. I haven't been fully initiated into the mysteries of Peter Thiel.
Well, because recently it was a meme on Twitter where, you know, like every single person over 10K on Twitter and the right is getting Thiel money. I don't know. So... Well, but
well,
yes.
So I want to go to Slav, by the way. So Slav, I want to get any final thoughts you may have on just our conversation, the state of journalism, and what is next for the Fedpost. What are you guys working on?
Oh man. Okay. Well, that last little question there, I'll give my little 2 cents on it, which is basically, I remember we had almighty Genie Groiper on the Fedpost, and he said something that stuck with me, which is, you know, that right-wingers have to constantly, you know, tell themselves that they're more powerful than they are, and left-wingers need to constantly tell themselves that they're weaker than they are. And that's basically what mainstream media outlets do. They basically follow those lines. And so if you want like my answer of what sucks about right-wing publications, I guess it would be that they basically just exist most of the time to just console their supporters and tell them why they're actually not losing as badly as they are. And then the real answer is just like the hegemonic demon that is liberalism that permeates all of these institutions.
Hey, I'm a real liberal. I don't know what you're talking about.
That's okay. And Arthur's a reactionary, and that's good.
No,
right?
honestly, I don't think these people are real liberals. I think this word has been thrown around and besmirched, and I don't really think it's the right word to use.
I think the nicest thing that I can say about it is that I think what's going on lately, especially with your kind of like woke inquisition, is that these are liberals that have jettisoned the nice good parts of liberalism in a lot of ways. But I mean, at their core, the people leading these places are absolutely liberals. But
well, what's a liberal principle that they would have?
What's a liberal principle that they would have?
Well, because it's like, I'll give you this example. A liberal principle for me would be making sure that let's say Trustworthy Slav can be heard out, as well as Cathy Young, as well as Arthur Bloom, that I would be able to give not only the time of day, but I will also make sure that nobody would be suppressing the voice of you or Arthur or anybody else here in this country. That to me would be a liberal value. That is the opposite of what I see happening today.
Okay, yeah, so in your actions, in your behavior, you are acting on that ideal, right? But to basically spread the idea that ideal is actually like a coherent view of how the world works in any meaningful sense would absolutely be one that I think basically defangs people to being able to interface with power or understand it in any coherent way. And I think is actively counter-revolutionary.
I 100% agree with the first part that you said before you said counter-revolutionary, which I may not completely understand it. What I would say, though, just to illustrate a bit more of my example here, is that I am the kind of liberal, and I think that this would be like quote unquote real liberalism, whatever you want to say, that a real liberal would take a look at a high level civilization, a high trust civilization, and say, okay, within this civilization, we can have this state of hearing other people out. However, within, let's say, a backward civilization, no offense, Cyber Ninja Zero, but like somewhere in the Middle East or wherever, where there's been a strong tradition of having these strongmen dictators all the time, no, I don't think they're quite ready for democracy.
The problem is that liberalism has...
That's just pure Oriental despot. That's just fucking Orientalism on your part, Lev. That's not...
No, it's not, because people are not ready for certain high-level civilization things in certain countries. I don't think...
Yeah, but Lev, they would look at us as
statement.
backwards. That's as...
I don't care what they look at us
Liberalism's approach to freedom is one of quantity over quality. And so you can't even get to that high trust civilization.
Well, it's like what this is a point that my friend Joel
I disagree, because we have we have Japan, we have South Korea, we have Estonia, we have places out there where it's not exactly some platonic ideal, but we still have certain liberal tenets there, and at the same time, I think that the direction there.
I think that the negative direction that Japan is actively going in right now is much more chalked up to social liberalism than the fact that they have maintained against all odds a relatively a strong sense of themselves and a high trust society. Right. I think that that's basically running on.
But this is a point that my friend Joel brought up about the writings of Wallerstein, the World Systems series, is that like the basic idea is that America lost actually by winning the Cold War, because when you have sort of a multipolarity, then liberalism had to find a way to become, like, in an odd way, vital and embrace sort of like a classic Schmittian distinction.
There's a dialectic going on.
Yes, exactly.
And
you destroy the dialectic with like little tribes and like the one unipolar Globo-Covegian world state. It's like,
Fukuyama, come on, break the rules. I completely agree with you. Right?
Does he do interviews still?
Oh,
I hope to get the guy on. But what would be your better alternative here? So let's say if you would reject liberalism on the account of it leads to all of these negative things we're seeing right now, what would be a better alternative to put in its place?
You asking me?
Yes.
Okay. Ideal personal preference, you have mass class consciousness. Actual answer with just like factoring in my understanding of the world and not being a naive idiot, religion. I mean, that's basically it. I mean,
simple as.
Yeah.
Well, why would religion and liberalism be necessarily separate from each other?
Come on.
No, Gio. All that liberalism would basically ask is that, that people wouldn't, discriminate on the basis of one's color of skin, shit like that. Otherwise, if you are abiding by the First
that's a really great example, right? So the lazy answer is to basically boil it down to, this stream has become a debate about liberalism now. I mean, sure. You can really abstract that point you were making and make it one about individualism versus collectivism. But I think that specific example you gave gives like a good way of arriving at that point, which is just specifically that way of interfacing with mass society through the lens of just like individual autonomy and human rights. Right. Which shouldn't be in your top 3 considerations for civilization. And that is one of the reasons why, unless you're talking about some fucking garbage bin Protestantism or something like that, most people just don't even know what to make of real valuable religion. Does that make sense? I see Gio nodding. But
I just don't know
because you don't have that sort of heliospheric world center at the heart of a civilization. You've collapsed it.
Well, you don't anymore now that you have the internet, now that you had the telegraph even before that.
No, but see, there was this great book, it was called Protocols, where your line of thinking about...
Oh, Lord, this is what it comes down to.
Digital fucking protocol. Was it called
right.
Yeah, it was a tech guy who is a Deleuzian, and he was sort of like debunking I know, Slav, I know. He was debunking the idea that the internet itself is like this Deleuzian rhizome that will, like, at the one end, like the tech bros thought back in the day, will liberate us and every government will be transparent. And on the other end, it's like some kind of like mass schizophrenic global deterritorialized plane where there's no hierarchy and there's no, and he was like demonstrating how this simply isn't true. The internet is just as much of a stratified space, an own space, if you will, to quote Bap, or a like arborescent organization than anything, right? So like this banking on like the internet, it has to an extent given the nomad a place, but it's given them a Skinner box as well. I mean,
True.
I have no illusions that like, and Arthur, you know, like that online dissidents are being placed within like this weird digital Skinner box all the time. I mean,
Well,
Yeah, I mean, it's really sad if you just like log on to, imagine like taking yourself from fucking 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and then just plopping them in front of like a smartphone or a computer and interacting with the web now. Like it's like a foregone future that we completely missed out on. Like everything, we don't even go to websites. We interact with web apps, right? I mean, it's
Well, I like this comment from TomTom, who says liberalism with strong cultural standards. This is kind of the thing that I'm
been tried,
contradictory.
Failed.
Okay, so if you're talking about this being contradictory, and then you want to offer something else up, and you say religion, that's fine. My whole thing here is who exactly is going to be, let's say, the puppeteer of your particular political project? How much power would they have to wield, and how could that possibly go wrong? That's what it comes down to for me.
I think that what you do with framing questions like this, right, is that you are jumping over the fact that there are stages to this scale of social change, right? And so what you want me to say is to walk into the bear trap of saying, this is the person I would put forward to do the killing, right? And I think what I would more say, right? Who's your Stalin, Slav, right? And I'm not going to say that.
Which is ironically why NRX kind of went by the wayside, because it's like you can't just do the like Baroquean neo-absolutist political analysis and then do like 1, 2, 3, clap my hands, Imperium. Like it just doesn't.
But I don't care if it comes in stages or not. What I'm getting to here, the reason why I asked, you're absolutely right, that the way at least I see it, whatever trajectory you go on, that's going to be one without any of those, at least the good parts of liberalism that I was talking about. How would it not result in something like that happening? And again, I'm not talking about like there not being smaller, cohesive communities that could take care of each other. I'm talking about like in the grand scale here, if we're talking about some political project, how would that not be the end result? And that's not an end result that I want, and I don't really think that's an end result any of you guys want. I don't know.
I guess the reason why I think it's a contradiction is that liberalism is basically parasitic on previously existing asabiya, social solidarity, whatever you want to call it. So we have a situation now where we have all the bad parts of liberalism, but none of the good ones. We have kind of fracturing society, decline of standards, all of that stuff. But then we've got no good side, which is we have a very intolerant society. There's not a lot of interest in hearing what other people have to think. So we have all of the downside, but none of the upside of liberalism. And you can't create that upside with liberalism. You have to create it with something else. It has to be something else that creates that upside, whether it's religion, that's maybe one answer. There are probably some other answers too, but liberalism can't generate its own solution.
I think it's I think it's a Dugan quote or something, basically saying like liberalism is very good at delivering freedom. It's very poor at giving a reason for the freedom in the first place. I butchered the fuck out of that. So if anyone wants to look it up, don't hold that against me.
These are very nice sounding words, but again, for me it comes down to
I have a lot of those.
Yes, you did. No, for me it though comes down to if you reject liberalism being a generative force, which I agree with you on, I don't think liberalism will ever be enough. That is not the reason why people live. My problem, though, is that what exactly do you want to be the generating force that's, if it's implemented as some kind of a political system, that's not going to be a top-down system. That's what I'm trying to get here, because it seems like the only logical conclusion.
What if the answer is pretty simple? A government that has some modicum of tolerance for illiberalism, right? We just have to be comfortable with some degree of illiberalism, at least officially, right?
Which, like, what kind of illiberalism? Just to be clear, what would we be getting rid of when it comes to certain liberal aspects that we're living under today?
I mean, the big one would be the anti-discrimination regime. If there's a case that the true liberal position is repealing the Civil Rights Act, right?
Age of entitlement. I know it's
age of entitlement case. We're going to have a hard time unwinding the "you must respect my pronouns" regime without also unwinding the Civil Rights Act. One follows from the other. So there has to be a genuine comfort with real uncoerced free association.
That's fine.
Even when that generates outcomes that you maybe don't favor. I certainly wouldn't favor a lunch counter being closed to Black people, but is that a price worth paying for a liberal society? I'm not sure. Maybe it is.
I think this is actually one of the most important things we ever talked about here on BTR, because it's not like we have one side versus the other just trying to, how do I say this? Not trying to overturn the game board here. Instead, Arthur, what I think that you're hinting at is that there would be more nuanced ways to look at what exactly are the things that we cannot live without, because I don't think any of us here wants to be put up against the wall in a dictatorship, thinking that we were going to be the ones that were going to be in charge. I don't think any of us, there were plenty of commies who I've talked with who do have that assumption that they're going to be the card-carrying communists and that only their enemies are going to have to suffer after the revolution. I think that what you're getting at, Arthur, is that we are going to have to, let's say, sacrifice certain liberal ideals, but my whole point is let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater here, and there are going to be certain things that we're going to have to agree upon that are absolutely necessary, and I will try to make the case in future streams of why those things are going to be necessary. And as far as finding what that nuanced position is, I think we're capable of doing that. But Average Centrist, I want to get your take on this as well, and we're going to be wrapping up soon, but I want to get your take on this
sorry,
as
it's getting pretty late around here.
Yes.
I'm kind of flagging here, I'm not gonna lie, so I'll probably jet after this next comment. Sorry, what was your question? So
my
final
question
comment
is about liberalism, where we were talking about what are certain things within liberalism that we may have a certain degree of room to change around, and what are certain things that, let's say, people who really, really hate what they're seeing today don't care about, so what if we get rid of A and B and C? As long as we have a base trad-pilled a lifestyle afterwards, it's all worth it. Like, what would you... Yeah.
I just don't think it should be enforced by, like, a kind of government. It should be a cultural phenomenon. Like, the whole thing with it, like, trying to say, like, oh, get rid of liberalism and change it for, like, I don't know, fucking monarchy or whatever the fuck else you want to replace it with. I think that's silly. Like, to me, liberalism is the foundation that you build on. It's not the thing that you actually make the be-all and end-all of everything. We're responsible for ourselves. We should make cultural decisions for ourselves. Like, that's the point of liberalism, to do that. Like, for me, being from the UK, like, we have a historical thing of, like, having, like, despotic fucking monarchies throughout our whole history. Like, it's, for us, like, it was to get away from that. Like, we still have a monarchy in a certain respect, but it's like, and this is why I actually have a lot of respect for America, really, because they really did just give the fuck you to that whole thing. And I think that, like, that's really important. We have to, it's so unique to have that happen. Like, the Enlightenment and all that stuff, like it's nothing like that has really happened in history before. And it's a very unique thing to happen. So we have to really cherish that and make sure that we cultivate it. But I think trying to replace it with something else, I think it's kind of silly. Like, I think you really, fundamentally, what you really need to do is just be more focused on what you can do culturally within liberalism.
One precedes the other, in my opinion, though.
Yes.
Maybe.
Yes,
yeah.
100%. Also,
sorry to ruin your point.
Also, any day of the week, I would take being able to make fun of the crusty ass old queen than some like faceless banker in the city of London who like I can't even like imagine what they look like or who they are or anything like that, which is the real aristocracy, what the what's actually going on. So I mean, and liberalism does grant that person go ahead to just run train the way they're doing, and it actively strips that person's subjects of being able to even sorry I feel like I just came at you a little harsher than I meant to, but yeah.
No, I mean, I'm not really asked, to be honest with you, man. And to be honest with you, it's hard for me to even put a cogent point together because it's like nearly 2 a.m. here, and I'm fucked, man. I'm not gonna lie,
Iron Man.
Yeah,
This is okay. Listen, everybody. This is going to be the end of the stream right now, but I think that this is a good cliffhanger moment. Average Centrist, I would love for you to come back on BTR when you're chipper, and we're going to have more of these discussions onwards and upwards.
I would love to. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
And Arthur, thank you so much for coming in. I really appreciate the time you took to come here. And where could people find you? You were on Twitter at Arthur Bloom. Where else could people find information about you, articles you've written, all that good stuff?
Yeah, Twitter is at J_Arthur_Bloom. That's the best place right now. I've got a link in my profile to all the stuff I've written. So yeah, you can find me there. And thanks for having me on.
It was a great pleasure to have you on. And Trustworthy Slav, I wish you would have had your avatar here, but what could we do?
I did my best, man.
I know, it's never going to be perfect, but you know what? Your beautiful voice more than made up for not having that beautiful Homer Simpson's avatar. Did you actually see that in the thumbnail I created that I put in that, by the way, that girl is from Pokemon, that news girl, but I put inside of her eyes a reflection of your Homer Simpson face. Did you see that?
I'm clicking on this.
So
I love that. That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Here is the close-up. So you see over here, Slav, right in her eye. She's in love with you, man. Would you marry her?
That's I'm not much of a weeb, so I'm gonna have to say no on that one. But I will say that's the look in someone's eye, the last thing they see before they're utterly destroyed out of believing in liberalism. No, this has been great. This has been great.
Vaporized.
Yeah, absolutely bodied.
And of course, you can follow Geo, twitter.com/GiantGeo.
I hope there's no downfall after this. I don't know. What am I saying? My God.
Wait, what downfall? What do you mean?
Well, never mind. Just don't worry about it.
I wasn't that bad, was I?
No. It's just,
by the way, I have an idea.
I dealt with enough e-drama this week. I
have an idea for a furry character. So we should have a furry
character.
No,
let's stop the stream right now. Stop. Goodbye.
Julius E. Vole. Because it's a vole, and I could add a little. Like a
vole weevil.
Yeah, I could add a little eyepiece to him, Julius E. Vola.
Or what about Julius E. Boa, and it's a boa constrictor?
That was like the one on the pet cemetery in The Simpsons, where it's like Humphrey Beauregard. Yeah, that was pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, if it's Evola, what it would be like a bunch of people with the lawnmowers, working on the backyard, and it's like a war zone, and Evola is just walking through that war zone.
Like
he doesn't
used
even
to
care.
Back in the day.
Yeah, the other voles are scared and they're in their holes.
One of my favorite replies I've ever read by a libtard was, I think it was the New York Times. It was that article about Bannon, and the one I could just imagine the upper middle class affluent white woman trying to strain herself to read about Julius Evola. The quick reply was, Julius Evola certainly is like Ebola, and I'm like, wow, that's just
All right, listen, guys. I don't want to keep you long. This is the end of the
I gotta
stream.
go eat.
Thank you guys so much for watching. Follow me on Twitter at LevPo. Follow Average Centrist. Here is Average Centrist's Twitter. You got to get the numbers up. So this is what we're gonna be doing. Everybody, follow Average Centrist on Twitter right now. And I really like your avatar here. It's like this girl with the Cheerios on her face.
I like it too. Yeah, that's why I picked it.
There
It's
we
pretty
go.
funny.
Here.
I thought you were an Asian woman. I got all excited.
I am an Asian woman, dude. That's how I identify, Gio. Come on.
All right, I just followed you.
Excellent.
Thank
All
you.
right,
Beautiful.
everybody, keep